Have you ever been told you didn't belong somewhere just because of who you are? Imagine saving for years to experience one moment of comfort, only to be humiliated before strangers. That's what happened to Dr. Celeste Morgan, an elderly black woman, graceful, successful, but judged before she even sat down. A flight attendant looked at her ticket, then at her face, and said, "Ma'am, this seat isn't for you." The whispers, the stares, the sting of quiet shame. But here's where the story changes. Instead of breaking, she made a choice to rise, to rebuild, and to reclaim what was stolen her dignity. What would you have done? If it were you in that seat, would you walk away, or would you rewrite the rules entirely? This isn't just a story about revenge, it's about justice, grace, and how one woman turned humiliation into history. Because sometimes, when the world shuts the door, you don't knock, you buy the building. Stay with us to discover how Celeste Morgan turned pain into power, and how her quiet strength changed the sky forever. If this story moves you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because stories like this deserve to be heard. The morning sun hung low over Houston International, glazing the glass terminal in a golden sheen. The air smelled faintly of coffee and jet fuel, the scent of beginnings. Dr. Celeste Morgan, 67, walked slowly toward gate C-24. She carried only a worn leather tote and a slim notebook filled with messy handwriting. Every line in her face held the story of someone who had spent decades healing others, a physician turned health equity advocate, and, quietly, the founder of a successful chain of community clinics. She'd spent her life helping people breathe easier, but that morning she would find herself struggling to breathe. Celeste wasn't flashy. Her white blouse was neatly pressed but simple. Her gray curls framed her face naturally. The only sign of wealth was her posture upright, assured, gentle. She handed her boarding pass to the gate agent with a warm smile. "Good morning, dear." The young man scanned it, smiled back, and said, "Welcome aboard, Dr. Morgan, first class, seat 2A." She nodded politely, thanked him, and stepped down to the jet bridge. The hum of air conditioning surrounded her like ocean waves. A small detail caught her eye, the flight attendants whispering near the galley, their eyes darting toward her. Celeste didn't think much of it. After all, she was used to people noticing her, but not like this. When she reached her seat, second row, window side, she placed her tote gently beneath the seat and opened her notebook. She always wrote before takeoff. A woman's voice interrupted her quiet ritual. "Excuse me, ma'am." Celeste looked up. The flight attendant towered over her. Her badge read Heather Grant, Lead Cabin Crew. Her smile was tight, the kind you give when you've already made up your mind about someone. "This section is reserved for first-class passengers only." Celeste blinked. "I am in first class." Heather tilted her head slightly. "Ma'am, maybe there's been a mistake. This ticket looks unusual." She snatched the boarding pass from Celeste's tray without asking. The older woman kept her composure. "That ticket was issued by my assistant yesterday. It's valid." Heather turned to another attendant, a younger one with nervous eyes, and murmured something under her breath. The younger woman shifted uncomfortably. "I'll double-check," Heather said, walking away briskly, holding the ticket like contaminated paper. Passengers around them were already watching. A few whispered, a few pulled out phones. Celeste straightened her posture. Her throat felt dry, but her face remained calm. She'd faced worse battles. She'd confronted senators, hospitals, even pandemics. But humiliation, when done quietly and politely, could cut the deepest. Heather returned a moment later with a clipped voice. "Yes, ma'am, we'll need you to move to economy. Apparently, your booking was flagged." Celeste frowned slightly. "Flagged for what irregularity?" Heather said. "We'll handle it from here." The woman extended a hand toward her tote, as if to help. Celeste drew it back, her voice low and precise. "Miss Grant, I'm not moving anywhere. That ticket is paid in full and I'm sitting exactly where I belong." Heather crossed her arms. "Either you move, or we call security. Your choice." She thanked him, gave him a small nod, and disappeared into the crowd. That night, her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Friends, former students, journalists, every network wanted a quote. Her daughter, Naomi Brooks, called from Atlanta. "Mom, are you okay? Do you want me to handle this? No, sweetheart?" Celeste said calmly. "I'm fine." Naomi hesitated. "They're calling it racism." "Mom, people are outraged." Celeste's eyes lingered on the TV footage of Heather escorting her down the aisle. "Let them be," she said quietly. "Sometimes outrage is the only light that reaches the dark." She turned off the television. The apartment fell silent except for the distant hum of city traffic. Celeste sat by the window, watching planes glimmer against the night sky, each light, a life heading somewhere. "All my life," she murmured, "I've built clinics, programs, systems, but maybe it's time to heal something else." She closed her eyes. The plane took off. Clouds drifted like soft shields outside her window. Celeste opened her notebook again. Though her hands shook slightly, she wrote only 3 words. "Still, I rise." When they landed at LaGuardia 3 hours later, the young man from earlier caught up with her. "Ma'am, I posted the video. People are furious." Celeste looked surprised. "Video." He nodded. "It's already everywhere, over 2 million views in an hour." Seat 2A. Celeste didn't say much. She thanked him, gave him a small nod, and disappeared into the crowd. That night, her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Friends, former students, journalists, every network wanted a quote. Her daughter, Naomi Brooks, called from Atlanta. "Mom, are you okay? Do you want me to handle this?" "No, sweetheart," Celeste said calmly. "I'm fine." Naomi hesitated. "They're calling it racism." "Mom, people are outraged." Celeste's eyes lingered on the TV footage of Heather escorting her down the aisle. "Let them be," she said quietly. "Sometimes outrage is the only light that reaches the dark." She turned off the television. The apartment fell silent except for the distant hum of city traffic. Celeste sat by the window, watching planes glimmer against the night sky. Each light, a life heading somewhere. "All my life," she murmured. "I've built clinics, programs, systems, but maybe it's time to heal something else." She closed her eyes. In her mind, she could still hear Heather's voice. "First class isn't for you." The words echoed, not as insult, but as a challenge. The next morning, she opened her email. Hundreds of messages, some hateful, most supportive. A message from a name she hadn't seen in years stopped her cold. From Harold Linwood, subject coffee. "It's been too long. Harold had once run one of the largest healthcare investment funds in Texas, a sharp, principled man who had retired quietly 5 years ago. She typed back a single line. "Coffee sounds right. I have something to discuss." "I've waited 67 years to be treated as if I belong. Another year doesn't scare me." He nodded slowly. "Then let's begin." Over the next few weeks, small, deliberate moves began. Shell companies, community funds, pension investments, each one acquiring a fraction of AeroVista stock. No single move loud enough to be noticed. But together, they whispered power into existence. Naomi handled the digital front tracking social sentiment, collecting stories from passengers who'd faced similar treatment. She built a quiet movement without slogans, just truth. The stories spread organically. A mother denied boarding because of her name. A veteran asked to move to the back of the plane. An elderly couple humiliated for asking for help. Celeste read every one of them at night, sitting in the dim glow of her desk lamp. Sometimes she cried. Sometimes she simply underlined a sentence and whispered, "We're not done yet. I don't want revenge. Harold, I want change, permanent, structural change. I want a company that teaches fairness, not fear." The coffee went cold between them. "Finally," Harold said, "you'd need partners, serious capital." Celeste smiled softly. "I built hospitals with $50 and borrowed faith. Money's never been the hardest part." She slid a folder across the table. Inside, printouts, financial summaries, shareholder distributions. Harold raised an eyebrow. "You already started, didn't you? Let's just say, I did my homework." At dawn, she walked into her kitchen, brewed her coffee, and watched the sunrise spill over the counter. She smiled not out of joy, but out of certainty. She called Javier, sell 2%, sell Y to make them think we're backing off, then buy 3% more through the community trust next week. You're playing chess with a hurricane, Celeste, then I'll move like the wind. Her tone carried no ego, just quiet fire. Weeks later, a new headline appeared: "Former physician leads investment group accused of targeting AeroVista." Celeste's photo filled the screen. The same calm expression, the same silver hair. Reporters camped outside her home. Neighbors whispered, but she didn't hide. When one journalist shouted, "Are you trying to destroy the airline?" she answered simply, "No. I'm trying to make it fly higher." Those words became a quote replayed on every network. Meanwhile, the young man who had filmed her on that first flight reached out online. His name was Ethan Price, a journalism student. He asked to interview her for his senior project. Celeste agreed. When he arrived, nervous and eager, she welcomed him with tea. He asked, "Dr. Morgan, what do you want people to remember about all this?" She smiled gently. "That justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers until people can't ignore the sound anymore." Ethan looked down at his notes, blinking fast. "Ma'am, that's powerful." Celeste chuckled softly. "It's just true." By spring, she controlled nearly 10% of AeroVista through multiple holdings, enough to demand attention, enough to make the board nervous. That's when the first threat arrived. A letter slid under her office door, unsigned. "Stop what you're doing, or we'll stop you." Naomi wanted to call the police. Celeste shook her head. "It's just fear talking. But what if it's real?" Naomi asked. Celeste looked up from her desk. "Everything real begins with fear. Sweetheart, but courage finishes it. That night, she couldn't sleep. The hum of the city outside reminded her of airplane engines. Her mind drifted back to that humiliating moment in Seat 2A, the rustle of strangers' pity, the taste of silence in her throat. She whispered to herself, "They thought they took my seat, but they gave me a mission." At that moment, something inside her hardened into resolve. In the following days, Celeste scheduled a meeting with a quiet group of ethics investors in New York. She presented data customer complaints, internal culture metrics, employee turnover. The numbers spoke louder than anger ever could. When she finished, the room was silent. One of the investors, an older woman named Linda Cho, said softly, "You're not just buying an airline. Dr. Morgan, you're rebuilding how people treat each other at 30,000 feet. Celeste smiled. Exactly. By summer. Her name had returned to the headlines, but this time not as a victim. Dr. Morgan forms coalition to demand cultural reform at Aero Vista Airlines. Employees began reaching out to her secretly. Cabin crew, gate agents, even pilots. Some wanted to apologize. Some just wanted to be heard. Every story reminded her why she'd started. One evening, Heather Grant, the very flight attendant who'd humiliated her, sent an email that began with, "I need to talk. I can't carry this anymore." Celeste read it twice, her expression unreadable. She didn't respond yet. Forgiveness, she believed, was something that had to be timed just right. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. A storm was coming. But Celeste Morgan had weathered storms all her life. She turned off the light, whispering to herself, "Let them come. I'm ready now." Night settled over Houston like a heavy quilt. Rain tapped softly against the tall windows of Dr. Celeste Morgan's apartment, each drop a heartbeat against the silence. The world outside was moving on, but inside, her life had narrowed to phone calls, reports, and the flickering light of her computer screen. The more progress she made, the lonelier it felt. She'd always known leadership could be isolating, but this was different. The air itself seemed to hum with tension. Since the threatening note arrived, her sense of safety had changed. Every knock at the door made Naomi jump. Even Harold, usually unflappable, had started checking his car mirrors twice before pulling out of the driveway. Celeste tried to keep them calm. "They won't scare us," she'd say gently. But at night, when she sat alone, she felt the tremor of fear crawling beneath her calm exterior. She didn't let it show. Courage, she believed, wasn't the absence of fear. It was the discipline to walk through it. One evening, as the clock neared midnight, her phone rang. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Dr. Morgan," a woman's voice whispered, "please don't hang up. My name is, well, you don't need it yet. I'm a flight attendant at Aero Vista. I just wanted you to know what you're doing, it matters." Celeste straightened. "You're calling me from work." "Yes, I'm on a layover, but I've seen the internal memos. They're trying to cover up what happened to you. To others. Please, keep going." Then the line went dead. For a long time, Celeste just sat there, the hum of the city fading into her pulse. Someone inside the company was reaching out. That small act of courage warmed her like sunlight in a cold room. The next morning, she told Naomi about the call over breakfast. Her daughter looked worried. "You're getting calls from employees now, Mom. That's dangerous. It's also a sign. Celeste said. When the truth starts leaking from the inside, it means the walls are cracking. Later that week, Harold called with news. We have enough shares now to request a board review. But if you push, they'll come after you harder. Expect the press to get nasty. Celeste smiled thinly. They already are. Indeed. The headlines had shifted tone. Stories about her agenda, commentators suggesting she was exploiting victimhood for profit, photos of her walking to her car turned into gossip pieces about her lavish lifestyle. The irony wasn't lost on her. People who called her a fraud had never once walked through the clinics she built or seen the neighborhoods she served. But even she couldn't ignore the weight of it. The comments, the speculation, the whispers about her sanity. It all chipped at her peace. There were nights she didn't answer the phone, didn't open her email, didn't even turn on the lights. She'd sit by the window, watching the city blink below, wondering how long one person could hold the line against a machine built to exhaust the good out of you. One of those nights, Naomi found her sitting there, still in her work clothes, eyes red from fatigue. "Mom," she said softly, "you need rest." Celeste didn't look up. Rest is a privilege. "Honey, justice isn't." Naomi knelt beside her. "You can't fight a war on no sleep. Please." Celeste reached over and took her daughter's hand. "I'm fine. Naomi, you forget I'm a doctor. I know how to survive." Naomi's eyes glistened. "That's not surviving. Mom, that's disappearing." The next morning, Celeste forced herself to breathe slower. She tried to bring normalcy back, cooked breakfast, played old jazz on the record player, even took a walk by the river. But peace didn't stay long. A black SUV had been parked near her building for 2 days. She noticed it each time she returned home. No plates, tinted windows, it never moved. Javier confirmed her fears. They've hired private investigators, corporate intimidation tactics. They'll try to rattle you. Celeste sighed. Then let them watch. They might learn something. Still, she began to feel the subtle erosion of her privacy. Emails appeared unread even after she'd opened them. A strange click on the phone line during the late-night calls. Naomi insisted she'd change her number. Harold wanted to hire security. Celeste refused both. If I live afraid, they've already won. That week, she received another anonymous message this time. An envelope. No return address. Inside was a photo, her speaking at a community event years ago, surrounded by children. Someone had circled her in red ink and scribbled, "Stay in your lane." She stared at it for a long time, then set it on fire over the kitchen sink. Watching the paper curl into ash, she whispered, "My lane built this road." 2 days later, she flew to New York for a private investors' conference. The city's cold air slapped her awake as she exited the terminal. Javier met her at the curb, holding an umbrella. "You sure you want to do this face to face?" "Always," she said. "People lie less when you can see their eyes." Inside the conference room, she presented her proposal, a new governance model for AeroVista, a framework to rebuild trust, diversity, and accountability. She spoke calmly, her voice steady but piercing. The room was full of men twice her size, executives who saw her as a nuisance, but when she finished, the silence felt like reverence. One of them, a gray-haired investor named Edward Marlin, finally spoke. "Dr. Morgan, you're describing an airline run like a moral institution." Celeste smiled faintly. "Maybe that's what a company should be. A place where profit and decency aren't enemies." After the meeting, Javier caught up with her in the hallway. "They're impressed," he said, "but they're also scared." "Good," she replied. "Scared people make honest choices." That night, back in her hotel room, exhaustion pressed down on her bones. The city lights stretched endlessly outside the window. She felt the ache of solitude again, the quiet cost of leadership no one talked about. She missed laughter, missed ordinary days where she was just a doctor, not a symbol. Her phone buzzed, a text from Heather Grant. "I can't sleep. I need to tell you something. Please don't block me." Celeste read the message twice. Then she typed, "Then tell me." A minute later, her screen lit up with Heather's confession. Paragraph after paragraph poured in about the training culture, the hidden memos, the pressure to lie about incidents. Heather ended with, "I was wrong that day. I was afraid of losing my job, but I lost my soul instead." Celeste closed her eyes, her heart unexpectedly heavy with compassion. Guilt could destroy or redeem. It all depended on timing. She typed back slowly, "Truth has a cost. Heather, are you ready to pay it?" The dots blinked for a long time. Then came the answer. Yes. The next morning, Harold called again. "There's chatter on the board. Sloan's planning something big. Merger, maybe. Designed to shut you out before the next vote." Celeste's voice hardened. "Then we'll need something bigger. Something they can't ignore. Like what Harold asked. Like light," she said. "The kind that burns through lies." When she hung up, Celeste stood by the window, her reflection merging with the skyline. For months she had fought in whispers, in the shadows, but now she felt at the tipping point approaching. Every lie had a weight limit, and Aerovista's lies were beginning to crack under their own gravity. She touched the glass, her hand trembling not with fear, but anticipation. The woman they'd tried to humiliate into silence was about to teach them what real power sounded like when spoken softly and followed by thunder. The morning began with wind. Not the soft kind that whispered through leaves, but the heavy kind that rattled windows and made the air feel charged. Dr. Celeste Morgan stood by her kitchen counter, stirring sugar into her coffee while the radio murmured headlines she wasn't sure she wanted to hear. It had been 3 weeks since Heather Grant's confession, the late-night messages that changed the shape of everything. Since then, Celeste hadn't heard from her again. She suspected fear had tightened its grip. Still, something told her the silence wouldn't last. When the doorbell rang, Celeste expected Naomi. Instead, Harold stood there, coat still damp from the drizzle outside. His expression was grim. "They've done it," he said. "Sloan just announced a merger proposal. Aerovista is joining with Orion Air. He's calling it a partnership for the future." Celeste set her cup down carefully. A merger with Orion. Exactly. Orion's debt-ridden. This isn't expansion, it's camouflage. He's trying to bury the investigation. Celeste sank into a chair. So that's his strategy. Turn one sinking ship into 2 and call it a fleet. Harold nodded. "We need to move. Once the merger goes through, the board will restructure. You'll lose your leverage." She glanced toward the window. The rain had stopped, but the clouds still lingered like a warning. Then it's time to show them what they've been hiding. Naomi arrived later that afternoon, tension already in her voice. "Mom, the press is eating up Sloan's announcement. They're calling him a visionary." Celeste gave a small, humorless smile. Visionary or magician, it's all illusion until the curtain drops. That night, She called Javier and asked him to prepare a data file, a compilation of every internal complaint, every buried incident Arrow Vista had ignored. Months of gathering evidence had led to this. The folder was enormous. It wasn't revenge, it was revelation. While the documents were being assembled, Celeste wrote a letter to Heather. Not an email, a letter, handwritten in neat cursive. Heather, truth is heavier than guilt, but lighter than silence. When you're ready, call me. We'll carry it together. She sealed it and gave it to Naomi to mail. 2 days later, at dawn, her phone rang. Heather's voice trembled through the line. I read your letter. I think I'm ready. Ready for what Celeste asked softly. To tell the truth, all of it. They met in a quiet church off Westheimer Road, the kind of place where light filtered through stained glass like mercy itself. Heather looked smaller than Celeste remembered, her hair tied back, eyes ringed with exhaustion. She held a flash drive in her hand. This is everything, Heather whispered. Emails, memos, recordings, proof they told us to profile passengers, to verify legitimacy of people who didn't look like they belonged in first class. Celeste's stomach turned. How many people? Dozens, maybe hundreds, and it went all the way up to Sloan. For a long moment, neither spoke. The hum of a distant traffic filled the silence between them. Then Heather began to cry. I'm sorry, she said. I did what they told me. I thought if I followed orders, I'd keep my job. I didn't think about what it did to people like you. Celeste placed a hand on her shoulder. You thought surviving meant obedience, but now you know survival means truth. They parted quietly. Heather left the church first, disappearing into the drizzle. Celeste stayed behind, sitting in the pew with the flash drive resting in her lap like a sacred thing. That night, she called Naomi and Harold to her apartment. Javier joined by video from New York. The group sat around her dining table. Lights dim, air thick with anticipation. Celeste placed the drive on the table. This is the truth, she said, and it's time we let it speak. Naomi frowned. You're thinking of leaking it. Yes, but not recklessly. We'll do it the right way through Ethan Price. Ethan, Harold asked. The journalism student, Celeste said. He's young, idealistic, and unbought. He'll tell it straight. Naomi hesitated. Mom, once this goes public, Sloan will retaliate. Hard. Celeste looked her daughter in the eyes, then let him. Some men only learn humility when they're forced to kneel before the truth. The next day, Celeste met Ethan at a park cafe near Rice University. He looked nervous, clutching his notepad like a shield. She slid the flash drive across the table. This isn't just about me, she told him. It's about everyone they silenced. If you publish it, you do it with integrity, facts only, no embellishments. Ethan swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am. I'll make sure it's clean. I know you will, she said with a gentle smile, because your heart's still young enough to remember what fairness feels like. Within a week, the story hit. The New York Ledger ran the headline, Aero Vista Scandal Whistleblower Reveals Systemic Passenger Discrimination. Television anchors debated it. Airlines scrambled to issue statements. Stockholders panicked. And for the first time in years, Celeste felt something like vindication, though it came laced with sorrow. Harold called that evening. It's working. Their shares dropped 9% overnight. Sloan's panicking, Celeste replied quietly. It's not about his panic. It's about their awakening. But victory never came without backlash. Within 24 hours, Aerovista's lawyers filed a suit claiming defamation and data theft. Celeste expected it. Naomi was furious. "They're suing you." After everything they've done, Celeste stayed calm. "Of course they are. The first act of a guilty man is always projection." The public, however, was no longer blind. Hashtags flooded social media again. Receipt E, My Fly Fair, Morgan Truth. Celebrities spoke out. Civil rights groups demanded reform, and the FAA announced an independent inquiry. Still, the noise was relentless. Reporters swarmed her front gate. A television van parked across the street. Some shouted questions that weren't really questions at all. "Are you proud of destroying jobs? Do you hate white people? Is this about power?" Celeste ignored them all. Power wasn't what she wanted. It was clarity. A week later, Harold brought news that made her pause mid-step. "Celeste, Sloane's been summoned to testify before the board. Internal review. They're turning on him." Her face softened with quiet relief. "Good. But we're not done until the company learns why they failed in the first place." That same evening, Heather sent her another message. "They know I leaked it. I'm being suspended." Celeste called immediately. "Heather, listen to me. You did the right thing. Whatever happens next, you stand tall." Heather's voice trembled. "It's easier for you to say that. You're brave." Celeste smiled sadly. "Bravery isn't a gift, Heather. It's a decision you make when there's nothing left to lose." For a brief second, neither spoke. Then Heather whispered, "Thank you for not hating me." "I don't hate you," Celeste said. "I see you. That's different." When the call ended, Celeste sat for a while, watching the city lights flicker across her window. She thought of all the people who had been dismissed, humiliated, pushed aside. She thought of her younger self, sitting on that plane, clutching a torn boarding pass and trying to look smaller so the world wouldn't notice. And then she thought of the flash drive, the spark that had turned humiliation into history. By morning, her resolve had crystallized into purpose. She dressed in her usual pressed white blouse, picked up her notebook, and told Naomi, "We're going to New York. It's time I looked Sloane in the eye." Naomi's eyes widened. "You mean, yes, the board meeting. I've been invited to speak." "Invited?" Harold asked when she called him. "That's bold of them." Celeste smiled, the kind of smile that came from deep faith. "No, Harold, it's not bold. It's desperate. They're hoping I'll be gentle." She turned off the phone and looked at the skyline. The clouds were clearing, sunlight spilling across the city like a benediction. "Let them hope," she whispered. But this time, the truth won't whisper back. The day of the board hearing arrived cloaked in tension. New York's skyline glinted coldly under a pale spring sun, its sharp edges mirroring the anticipation humming through the city. Dr. Celeste Morgan sat in the back of the black sedan, watching buildings slide past like silent witnesses. Naomi sat beside her, scrolling through messages on her tablet press inquiries, supportive letters, angry threats. It all blurred into static. "Mom, they've doubled security around the headquarters," Naomi murmured. "It's chaos down there, protesters on both sides." Celeste nodded without looking up. Her notebook lay open on her lap, the page filled with her small, tidy handwriting. She wasn't rehearsing a speech. She was writing a promise. When they arrived at the Aero Vista Tower, the crowd was already shouting. Reporters surged forward, microphones flashing like small weapons. Celeste walked through them calmly. The collar of her coat turned up, her face unreadable. Cameras caught her every step. Some voices screamed support, others slung accusations. She didn't flinch. Inside the lobby, Harold and Javier were waiting. Harold's tie was crooked, a sign he was nervous. "You don't have to face them alone, Celeste," he said. "I'm not alone," she replied quietly. Truth never travels alone. They entered the elevator together, the mirrored walls reflecting their tense faces. As the doors slid shut, Celeste glanced at her reflection. The lines on her face looked deeper under the fluorescent light, but her eyes, those were steady. The boardroom occupied the top-floor long-glass table, panoramic view of Manhattan, and 12 men and women who looked more like politicians than business leaders. Martin Sloan sat at the head, his expression polished to corporate perfection. The moment Celeste stepped inside, he rose slightly, offering a thin smile. "Dr. Morgan," he said, "we appreciate your attendance. I trust you're aware of the gravity of this meeting." Celeste set her notebook on the table. "Oh, I'm aware. Mr. Sloan, the question is, are you?" A low murmur rippled through the room. Sloan ignored it and gestured toward a chair. "Please, let's be civil." She sat but didn't relax. Javier and Harold positioned themselves behind her like quiet sentinels. The meeting began with routine formalities, stock performance, merger logistics, legal updates. Sloan droned on about synergy and innovation, his words sliding across the table like oil. Celeste listened, waiting for her opening. When he finally paused, she spoke. "You forgot one item on your agenda. Mr. Sloan." "Ethics?" Sloan's jaw tightened. "I think we've covered that topic exhaustively in our statement to the press." "No," she said softly. "You issued a denial. That's not the same thing." He leaned back, feigning calm. "Dr. Morgan, you've made serious allegations. You've disrupted operations. Cost this company millions in market value." Celeste cut him off. "You cost this company its soul. I'm just the woman who noticed." The room went silent. Then she reached into her folder and pulled out a single printed email, the one from the leaked documents Heather had provided. She slid it across the table toward Sloan. "This is your signature," she said. "You authorized training that encouraged employees to profile passengers based on perceived social status and appearance. That's not policy, that's prejudice in a uniform." Sloan didn't touch the paper. Those documents were illegally obtained. "Truth doesn't care how it's found," Celeste said. He turned to the board. "This is exactly the grandstanding I warned you about. Dr. Morgan's crusade is personal. She was embarrassed, and now she wants revenge." Celeste's voice dropped to a calm, almost tender register. "You think humiliation makes people vindictive? Sometimes, Mr. Sloan. It just makes them clear." Harold stepped forward then, sliding a USB drive onto the table. "This contains our full audit," he said. "Internal communications, ignored complaints, deleted files, all cross-verified by independent analysts." One of the board members, Linda Cho, picked it up. Her expression was neutral, but her eyes flicked toward Celeste briefly, like a spark of recognition. Sloan's composure cracked for the first time. "This meeting is over." But before he could stand, the door opened, every head turned. Heather Grant stepped inside. Her face was pale, but her posture was steady. She held a small folder in her hand. "No," she said, voice trembling but firm. "It's not over." Sloan froze. "You're not authorized to be here." "I was." she said, until you suspended me, but I still remember the truth, and that's authority enough. She looked directly at Celeste for a heartbeat, gratitude and fear mingling in her eyes, then turned to the board. You've all seen the stories. I'm the one who made them true. I followed orders that went against everything decent. I'm not proud of it, but I'm here to make it right. She handed Linda Cho the folder. These are recordings meetings where senior staff discussed passenger image control. We were told to politely relocate anyone who didn't fit the brand profile. That included Dr. Morgan. The room erupted. Voices overlapped, chairs scraped, phones started buzzing. Sloan slammed his hand on the table. You have no idea what you're doing. Heather's voice broke but didn't falter. Yes, I do. I'm finally doing the right thing. Celeste rose slowly, the power in her stillness louder than any shouting. Thank you, Heather, she said gently. That took courage. Sloan turned on her, fury replacing charm. You think you've won. You'll drag this company down, destroy livelihoods. Celeste met his glare evenly. If those livelihoods depend on cruelty, they deserve to fall. Security entered then, called by someone outside, but the damage was already done. Cameras from the press, somehow tipped off, were waiting in the corridor. When the doors opened, the story spilled out before anyone could contain it. By evening, every news network was broadcasting the footage, Sloan shouting, Heather trembling, Celeste standing calm as marble. The clip became a symbol, the powerful man unraveling before the quiet dignity of the woman he'd tried to humiliate. At home that night, Celeste didn't celebrate. She sat by the window again, the city lights dancing against her reflection. Naomi brought her tea, setting it down beside her. It's everywhere. Mom, you broke the story open. Celeste shook her head. No, truth broke itself open. I just refused to look away. Harold called later, voice heavy with awe. You realize you just changed the industry. Right. Not yet, she said softly, but we've shaken it. Now we make sure it doesn't settle back into the same shape. Naomi sat beside her, scrolling through messages of support pilots thanking her, passengers sharing stories, strangers calling her a hero. Do you feel proud? Naomi asked. Celeste smiled faintly. I feel lighter. That's all pride ever should be. But as the night deepened, fatigue pressed on her bones. The adrenaline was gone, leaving the ache of everything she'd carried. She rubbed her temples and whispered, It's not over, Naomi. They'll regroup. They always do. Naomi leaned her head on her shoulder. Then we'll regroup faster. Celeste closed her eyes, breathing slowly. The wind outside had softened. Somewhere in the distance, a plane roared through the night sky, Aero Vista's logo gleaming faintly under the moonlight. She whispered almost to herself, Next time, that sky will belong to everyone. And in that moment, she knew this wasn't just her fight anymore. It was a movement that had found its wings. The morning after the board confrontation, the world woke up to chaos. Every news outlet, podcast, and blog carried the story of Dr. Celeste Morgan and the whistleblower who'd turned Aero Vista's boardroom into a battlefield. Footage of Sloan's outburst replayed on an endless loop. Headlines screamed words like reckoning, revolution, and redemption. In her Houston apartment, Celeste watched the coverage in silence. Naomi had made breakfast, but neither touched it. The television's glow cast flickering light over the dining table where Celeste's laptop, papers, and notebooks sprawled like a battlefield of their own. Harold's voice came through the speakerphone. They've suspended Sloan pending investigation. The board's scrambling to save face. The FAA's formally opened an inquiry, and the shareholders, well, they're restless. Celeste rubbed her temples. Restless shareholders are dangerous. They don't care about justice, they care about dividends. Maybe, Harold said, but right now, they care about stability. And ironically, you're the only one who looks stable. Naomi shot her mother a small, proud smile. He's right. The public trusts you. Mom, they see you as the one honest voice in a sea of spin. Celeste turned off the television. Public trust is fragile. It can vanish the moment it becomes inconvenient. We'll need to protect the truth before they rewrite it. That afternoon, her inbox flooded. Invitations from talk shows, offers for book deals, requests from advocacy groups all wanting to borrow her fire. She ignored them. She wasn't interested in becoming a symbol. She wanted reform, real, measurable change. By evening, she received a call from Linda Cho, the board member who had silently sided with her during the meeting. Dr. Morgan, Linda said softly, we've convened an emergency session. The board wants to propose a restructuring. They're considering you for an advisory position. Celeste paused. An advisory position, yes. It's unofficial. But between us, it's a way to stabilize investor confidence. They need your name attached to something credible. Celeste could hear the unspoken truth they wanted her face, not her voice. She replied carefully. Tell them I'll think about it. After she hung up, Naomi asked, You're not actually going to accept, are you? Celeste smiled faintly. Of course not, but I want to hear what kind of peace they think they can buy. 2 days later, she flew to Dallas for a private meeting at AeroVista's headquarters. This time, there were no cameras, no press, no crowds, just power suits and whispered agendas. Sloan's seat at the head of the table was empty, but his shadow lingered over every person in that room. Linda greeted her at the door. They're nervous, she murmured. You have leverage. Use it. Celeste nodded. Inside, she found 10 board members waiting. Their smiles were polite, brittle. The chairman, a gray-haired man named Thomas Grayson, opened the meeting. Dr. Morgan, thank you for coming. Let me start by saying we regret what you experienced. The board does not condone discrimination in any form. Celeste folded her hands. Regret isn't a policy. Mr. Grayson, what are you planning to do? He cleared his throat. We're implementing diversity training, reviewing our internal complaint procedures, cosmetic, she interrupted. You're painting over rot. Murmurs rippled around the table. Grayson tried to regain control. Dr. Morgan, we're offering you an advisory position. You'd oversee ethics and inclusion initiatives public-facing. Of course, it would show our commitment to accountability. Celeste leaned back, studying him. So, you want me to decorate your conscience? Excuse me. You don't want reform. You want redemption without repentance. Linda's eyes darted nervously. Celeste, she warned softly, but Celeste didn't stop. If you want my involvement, it won't be symbolic. I want authority, oversight of operations, hiring, training, and disciplinary reviews, and transparency, public access to data on customer discrimination complaints. Grayson's jaw tightened. That's impossible. You're asking for control. I'm asking for justice, she said calmly. The room fell silent after a long pause. Grayson muttered. "We'll consider it." Celeste stood. "You won't have long. The public's patience is shorter than your quarterly reports." When she left the building, she exhaled deeply. The sun was setting behind the skyline, painting the glass towers in amber light. For the first time in months, she felt something close to peace, not victory, but clarity. Back at her hotel, she found a message waiting for her, a voicemail from Heather. The woman's voice was shaking. "They're threatening to sue me personally. I think they're trying to make me retract my statement. I don't know what to do." Celeste called her immediately. "Heather, listen to me carefully. You don't retract. You don't apologize for telling the truth. You hold your ground." Heather sniffled. "They said they'll ruin me." Celeste's tone softened. "Then they'll find out what happens when they try to ruin a woman who's already rebuilt herself once." After the call, Celeste phoned Aisha Monroe, a civil rights attorney she'd worked with years ago. "Aisha," she said, "I need protection for a whistleblower, and possibly for myself." Aisha's response was firm. "You've started something, Celeste. I hope you're ready for it to grow beyond you. I don't want it to be about me." Celeste said. "That's not how change works." Aisha replied. "You light a fire, and the world decides how far it burns." The next morning, Celeste woke to find a crowd of supporters outside her hotel. They held signs reading, "Fly fair" and "Stand with Celeste." Cameras followed her as she stepped outside. For the first time, she didn't shrink from them. She met their lenses head-on, her quiet dignity disarming every shouted question. A young woman in the crowd, probably in her 20s, called out, "Dr. Morgan, what keeps you fighting?" Celeste paused. "Because I remember what it felt like to be unseen," she said. "And I refuse to let anyone else feel that way on my watch." Her words went viral within hours. The clip spread across social media, racking up millions of views. Commentators called it the moment the movement found its voice. Inside Aero Vista, however, panic deepened. Emails leaked again, this time showing that executives had tried to suppress earlier discrimination reports. Stock prices plummeted another 10%. Investors began demanding a leadership overhaul. Herald called with breaking news. They're convening an emergency shareholders vote next week. If Sloan's officially removed, the board might offer you interim leadership. Celeste's breath caught. Leadership. It's not official, but the market trusts you more than anyone else right now. Even the media's calling you the woman who saved Aero Vista. Celeste laughed softly. "I didn't save it. I exposed it. But maybe that's the same thing in the end." That evening, she walked alone through the city streets. New York pulsed around her horns. Lights, fragments of music from passing cars. Yet amid the noise, she felt a strange stillness. The fight had expanded beyond her, but she could still feel its heartbeat in her chest. As she crossed a bridge lit by a soft blue light, she stopped halfway and looked down at the dark water below. For a fleeting moment, she thought of her late husband, his calm voice telling her years ago, "Courage doesn't roar, Celeste. It breathes." She whispered to the wind, "I'm still breathing." When she turned back toward the skyline, her phone buzzed a text from Harold. "Be ready, they're about to call the vote, and the numbers look in your favor." Celeste smiled faintly, the city lights reflecting in her eyes like stars waiting to be claimed. "Then let them vote," she whispered. "It's time they learned who really owns the sky." The conference hall inside Aerovista's headquarters buzzed like a hive about to erupt. Rows of shareholders filled the room, faces lit by the glow of phone screens and muted whispers. Journalists crowded near the back, waiting for the kind of moment that history liked to replay. At the front, the board members sat stiffly behind long tables. The air smelled of tension and expensive perfume. Celeste Morgan entered quietly, accompanied by Harold and Naomi. Her calm presence drew eyes immediately, though she seemed oblivious to it. Her white blouse contrasted against the dark suits around her, a quiet symbol of grace in the middle of combat. Linda Cho approached her and leaned in close. "The numbers are tight," she whispered. "You've got maybe 53% of the shareholders leaning in your favor, but if Grayson shifts his block, it could swing." Celeste nodded. "Let's make sure he doesn't." A few seats away, Thomas Grayson sat reviewing documents with an expression that betrayed fatigue. Sloane's name still lingered on the agenda beside the phrase "vote of confidence." It was ironic, Celeste thought, how power always clung hardest to those least worthy of it. When the chairman called the meeting to order, a hush spread over the room. "This session," he announced, "will determine the immediate leadership of Aerovista Airlines. The shareholders will vote to either reinstate Martin Sloane or appoint interim leadership pending further investigation." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed. Celeste folded her hands and waited. Sloane entered, then composed, confident, but slightly hollow-eyed. The media had chewed through his image, yet arrogance still clung to him like a second skin. He gave a polite nod to the room, ignoring Celeste entirely as he took his seat. Thomas gestured for silence. "Before we proceed with the vote, both parties will be allowed brief statements." Sloane rose first. His voice was smooth, rehearsed. "Ladies and gentlemen, what happened in recent weeks has been exaggerated beyond measure. Aerovista has served millions of passengers faithfully for decades. Yes, mistakes were made, but we must not destroy a legacy for the sake of a media spectacle. Our focus should be recovery, not retribution." A few polite nods followed, but many sat stone-faced. Then Thomas turned to Celeste. "Dr. Morgan, your statement." Celeste stood slowly. The room quieted completely. Her voice, calm and unhurried, carried farther than she expected. "I didn't come here to destroy a legacy," she began. "I came here because that legacy forgot the people who built it." Eyes fixed on her. She continued. "For too long, this company treated decency as optional. It turned human dignity into a customer service line item. What happened to me wasn't an isolated mistake. It was a symptom, and symptoms only fade when you treat the disease." A murmur of approval swept through the room. Even some of the board shifted uncomfortably. Celeste's tone softened. "I don't hate this company. I want it to heal. But healing requires truth. It requires accountability, not apologies crafted by lawyers. If Aerovista is to rise again, it must learn to fly with integrity, not arrogance." When she sat down, the silence that followed was louder than applause could ever be. Grayson looked uneasy. "We will now proceed to vote," he announced. "Ballots are distributed electronically. Results will display shortly." As screens lit up across the room, Naomi squeezed her mother's hand under the table. Celeste didn't move. Her expression remained composed, though her pulse quickened beneath the stillness. On the projection screen, numbers began to flicker, percentages shifting like tides. 51, 52, then back to 50. Sloan glanced smugly at his corner of supporters. Then came the next wave, 54, 55, 56. Gasps. Someone whispered, "It's turning." Finally, the screen locked at 57% in favor of leadership change. A roar of mixed voices filled the hall. Cheers, protests, disbelief. Cameras flashed. Sloane's face drained of color. Thomas Grayson cleared his throat, his voice breaking slightly. By majority vote, Martin Sloan is hereby removed from his position as Chief Executive Officer of Aero Vista Airlines. Interim leadership will be appointed immediately. He looked toward Celeste. "Dr. Morgan, the board has nominated you as acting chairwoman until a permanent transition is approved." The room erupted again. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras surged forward. Naomi's eyes brimmed with tears, while Harold's hand found Celeste's shoulder in silent pride. Celeste rose, but instead of smiling, she lifted her hand to quiet the noise. "Thank you," she said softly. "But this isn't about me. It's about everyone who's ever been told they don't belong. Let this company prove finally that every passenger, every worker, every person deserves the same seat in the sky." Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then thunderous. After the meeting, chaos spilled into the lobby. Reporters surrounded her, microphones waving like branches in the wind. "Dr. Morgan, how does it feel to lead the very company that humiliated you?" one shouted. Celeste paused, choosing her words carefully. "It doesn't feel like victory," she said. "It feels like responsibility." Outside, the air was cool and bright. Protesters who had gathered earlier now cheered as she stepped through the revolving doors. Someone shouted, "We love you, Dr. Morgan." Another called out, "You did it." Celeste smiled faintly, but her mind was already turning ahead. The vote might have dethroned Sloan, but the structure he built still stood, and it would take more than applause to dismantle it. That evening, back at her hotel, she stood before the window overlooking the city. Naomi sat on the couch scrolling through social media posts filled with celebration. "You've become the most powerful woman in the airline industry overnight," Naomi said quietly. Celeste turned from the glass. "Power isn't the goal, Naomi. Change is." Naomi set the phone aside. "Do you think they'll really let you change anything?" Celeste considered this. "They'll resist. They always do. But I've learned something about resistance. It eventually collapses against persistence." Later, Harold joined them with a bottle of champagne. "You realize," he said with a grin, "you just pulled off what people will call the most poetic act of justice in aviation history." Celeste accepted the glass he offered but didn't drink. Poetic justice doesn't rebuild systems. "Harold, tomorrow I start rewriting policy. Quiet victories make louder futures." He chuckled. "You really don't know how to enjoy a win, do you?" She smiled. "Maybe I do. I just prefer the kind that lasts." When Harold left and Naomi went to bed, Celeste remained by the window, watching planes slice across the dark sky. One of them belonged to Aero Vista, its logo glinting faintly against the stars. She thought of Heather Grant, the woman who risked everything to speak truth. She thought of the anonymous passengers who had written her, the ones who'd said her courage gave them hope. Celeste whispered softly, "This is for you, for all of you." Her phone buzzed on the table. A message from an unknown number appeared. "Congratulations, Dr. Morgan. Enjoy your seat while it lasts." Her heart tightened, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she typed back a single line. "I earned it. Now watch what I do with it." Then she placed the phone down, exhaled, and finally allowed herself one long, steady breath. Tomorrow would be another storm. But tonight, she had taken the sky back. By dawn, the world had already rewritten the headlines. Dr. Celeste Morgan takes control of Aero Vista Airlines. The photos showed her leaving the conference hall, head held high, the sun rising behind her like a crown. People called her the sky reformer, the aviator of justice, but for Celeste, the victory tasted bittersweet. She sat alone in her new office, the same one that had belonged to Martin Sloan. The walls were bare except for a single-frame photograph left behind a jet slicing through clouds. She studied it quietly, then turned it face down on the desk. The hum of the city echoed faintly through the windows. This wasn't a triumph, it was the beginning of another war. Her inbox overflowed with congratulatory messages, but buried among them were threats cloaked in polite language. Your leadership may face unforeseen challenges. Some transitions are better handled privately. One message, unsigned, was simpler. "You don't belong here." She smiled sadly. "They still think that," she whispered. "Then they haven't learned anything yet." Naomi arrived with 2 coffees, her hair tied up, her expression a mix of pride and worry. "Mom, there's already a press line outside. Everyone wants your first statement as CEO." "I'm not CEO," Celeste corrected gently. "I'm the interim chairwoman. The difference is accountability." Naomi rolled her eyes affectionately. "Semantics won't stop the cameras." Celeste took a sip of coffee. "They can film the work instead." A soft knock came at the door. Harold entered, holding a thick folder. "Mornin', Madam Chair," he said, "only half joking. We have a problem. Sloan's allies are already moving to undermine you. They're spreading rumors about financial instability. If we don't stabilize the stock, they'll frame you as inexperienced." Celeste set her cup down. "Then we stabilize it with transparency." Harold frowned. "Transparency doesn't calm markets. It spooks them. It calms people," she said simply, "and people fly, not numbers." Within hours, she called an internal press conference. The board advised against it, but she ignored them. Standing at the podium in a navy suit, she faced a sea of microphones and skeptical faces. "I'm not here to protect Aero Vista's image," she began. "I'm here to rebuild its integrity. Every passenger who steps onto our planes deserves dignity. That's not public relations, it's basic humanity." Reporters leaned forward. One shouted, "Dr. Morgan, do you have experience running an airline?" Celeste smiled slightly. "No, but I have experience saving lives, and after what this company's done, it could use a little life-saving." The room fell silent for a beat before erupting into applause. Naomi, watching from the back, felt tears sting her eyes. For the first time, the company's story sounded like a heartbeat instead of a press release. That evening, as Celeste returned to her office, Javier Ruiz called from New York. His voice was tight. "Celeste, we found something in the financial archive's hidden accounts offshore, linked to Sloan and 2 other executives. They've been siphoning funds for years. If this comes out, it could collapse the company before you rebuild it." Celeste's grip on the phone tightened. "Send me everything. No leaks. Not yet." Javier hesitated. "Are you sure this could clear your name permanently?" "Timing is power," she replied. "We'll use it when it matters most." That night, she stayed late, poring over reports and internal messages, The building emptied around her. Only the sound of cleaning staff and the hum of elevators remained. She ran her fingers across the glossy surface of Sloane's old desk and whispered, "You built an empire on silence. Let's see how it sounds when the truth echoes." Her phone buzzed. A text from Heather. "I'm proud of you, but be careful. There are people inside who still answer to him." Celeste typed back, "Thank you. Stay safe. Truth's a long flight. Turbulence is part of it." The following morning, she summoned the department heads. The meeting was held in the executive boardroom, a place that once intimidated even senior staff. She stood at the head of the table and said, "We're going to audit every process from hiring to flight operations. Every decision will be documented and accessible. No more secrets." A few faces stiffened. One executive, a tall man named Greg Holloway, frowned. "With all due respect, Dr. Morgan, these measures could paralyze operations." Celeste met his gaze evenly. "Then we'll slow down until we can move forward with conscience. I'd rather lose time than lose our humanity." When the meeting ended, murmurs filled the hallway. Some admired her resolve. Others plotted quietly. She could sense it, the undercurrent of resistance winding through polished smiles. That afternoon, Naomi and Harold joined her for a late lunch in the executive lounge. Through the wide windows, they could see planes taxiing across the runways below, silver wings glinting in the sun. "Feels strange, doesn't it?" Harold said, "seeing them from this angle." Celeste nodded. "It's not the view that matters. It's who gets to sit on the plane." Naomi smiled. "You always sound like you're writing poetry." Celeste shrugged. "Truth has rhythm if you listen close enough." Their peace didn't last long. A breaking news alert flashed on Harold's phone. He read it aloud. Anonymous source claims new Aerovista chairwoman under investigation for insider trading. Naomi's face drained of color. "What, that's not true." Celeste's voice was calm. "Of course it isn't. But lies move faster than evidence. Within an hour, the rumor spread online. News channels speculated. Hashtags appeared. A corrupt chair. Fraud in first class. It was orchestrated, a calculated attempt to discredit her." Harold slammed his hand on the table. "This has Sloane's fingerprints all over it. He's behind this smear campaign." Celeste nodded. "Then we'll fight truth with transparency." She immediately held another press briefing, live-streamed across networks. Cameras zoomed in as she faced the storm head-on. "I've seen lies destroy good people," she began. "I won't let them do it again. Every financial transaction under my name is open for review. If you want honesty, come look at my books. If you want scandal, you'll have to write fiction." The statement struck like lightning. Within hours, Aerovista released official records verifying her integrity. The rumor evaporated, and the public's faith surged even higher. But Celeste didn't celebrate. She knew this was only the first counterstrike. The real battle wasn't in headlines. It was in the corridors of power, where old loyalties hid like dust behind curtains. That night, as she prepared to leave, the lights in her office flickered. She looked up. Outside, in the reflection of the glass wall, she saw a figure lingering near the door. "Hello?" she called. The figure stepped forward. It was Greg Holloway. His face was shadowed. "Dr. Morgan," he said, voice low, "you're making enemies you can't see. Some of them don't forgive. Be careful who you trust." Celeste studied him carefully. "Are you warning me or threatening me, Mr. Holloway?" He smiled faintly. Whichever keeps you awake tonight." Then he turned and walked away. She stood there for a long time, listening to the echo of his footsteps fade. A chill crawled through her spine, but she didn't show it. Instead, she whispered to herself, "I've been awake for a long time." When Naomi returned later to check on her, Celeste was still sitting by the window, the city's night lights shimmering against her reflection. "Mom, maybe you should take a break," Naomi said softly. "You can't keep this pace forever." Celeste looked up at her daughter, her eyes soft but resolute. "I can rest when every seat in that plane means equal ground." Naomi exhaled, a mix of admiration and concern. "Then I hope the world learns to keep up with you." Celeste smiled faintly. "It will. Eventually, change just needs a pilot who refuses to land." 3 weeks into her new leadership, Celeste Morgan began to understand that power didn't roar. It whispered through corridors, traded favors in boardrooms, and hid behind smiles that didn't quite reach the eyes. Her days blurred into meetings, calls, interviews, and late nights studying policies. Progress was visible but fragile, like glass catching sunlight just before it shatters. One morning, Naomi entered her office carrying a tablet. Her expression was pale. "Mom, you need to see this." Celeste took the device, scrolling through the headline that made her stomach turn. "Exclusive private emails reveal Celeste Morgan's secret plan to sell AeroVista shares." The article displayed screenshots fabricated but convincing, showing correspondence that implied she intended to offload company stock for personal gain. The timing was perfect, just days before AeroVista's first quarterly report under her leadership. Harold stormed into the room minutes later. "I've already called the legal team. These are fakes, but they're everywhere, major outlets, social feeds, even international press." Celeste exhaled slowly. "Sloan?" Naomi frowned. "He's behind this again, or one of his disciples." Celeste replied, "Corruption doesn't retire, it reorganizes." By noon, the company's stock had dropped 7%. Investors panicked. Employees whispered. Supporters online defended her, but doubt had already started to creep in. Celeste called an emergency meeting with Harold, Linda, and Javier. They gathered in her office, tension thick in the air. Javier placed a folder on her desk. "The source of the leak is internal," he said. "The metadata traces back to one of the senior communication servers. Someone with clearance." Linda frowned. "That narrows it down to maybe 10 people. Celeste's gaze hardened. "Greg Holloway." Harold looked uncertain. "You think he'd risk exposure?" "He already warned me," she said quietly. That was his confession in disguise. Javier nodded. "He's tied to a shadow fund still connected to Sloan's holdings. I'll confirm it by morning." Celeste rose, her calm voice cutting through the air like steel wrapped in silk. "Then we'll handle it by dawn." That night, she sat alone under the soft hum of her office lamp. Outside, the city's lights shimmered, reflecting off the glass walls like constellations of deceit. The silence carried weight. Every choice she'd made so far had demanded grace, but now she would need precision. Naomi entered quietly with tea. "You should rest." Celeste smiled faintly. "Resting is what they expect. Instead, I'll prepare." Naomi hesitated, then said softly, "Sometimes I wish you'd let someone else fight a few of these battles." Celeste reached out, touching her daughter's hand. "You can't hand over the wheel in a storm. Naomi, you just steer until the sky clears. by morning. Javier's confirmation came through. Greg had sent encrypted files to a private contact in London, someone linked to Sloane's media advisor. It was deliberate sabotage. Celeste didn't explode. She didn't raise her voice. Instead, she called a meeting and invited every senior executive, including Greg. The tension was visible when he entered, his confidence wrapped in feigned indifference. Celeste began the meeting calmly. Last night, I reviewed some disturbing reports. It appears a senior staff member used company systems to leak fabricated documents intended to harm Aerovista's leadership. Greg leaned back in his chair. That's a serious accusation. Surely you're not suggesting anyone in this room would. Celeste interrupted him gently. I'm not suggesting. I'm confirming. Gasps rippled through the room. She pressed a button on the table, and the screen behind her flickered to life, showing time-stamped transfers from Greg's login credentials. His name glowed in red across the top. Greg froze. This is taken out of context. Javier spoke up, his tone sharp. The context is your betrayal. The evidence came directly from the network logs. You didn't even try to hide it. Greg's composure faltered. You think you can accuse me and survive the fallout? Sloane will bury you. Celeste turned to him with quiet authority. You're mistaken. Mr. Holloway, men like Sloane bury themselves. I just make sure the truth plants something better where they fall. She signaled to security. Escort Mr. Holloway from the premises. As he was led out, Greg glared at her. You won't last 6 months. Celeste met his gaze steadily. I've lasted 70 years. Mr. Holloway, 6 months is mercy. When the door closed, the room was silent except for the sound of people exhaling. Linda spoke first. That was surgical. Celeste nodded slightly. Justice shouldn't be loud. It should be clear. Later that day, she addressed the press once more. Standing before the Aerovista logo, she spoke with the same composed grace that had made her story resonate across the country. An attempt was made to discredit this company's integrity. She said, "It failed because transparency isn't just a policy, it's our shield. We'll continue to build an airline where truth doesn't need defending." Her words turned the tide. The stock began to recover. Employees flooded her inbox with messages of support. For every shadow Sloane sent, she seemed to find a way to turn it into light. But Celeste knew victory came with a cost. Late that night, she received an email from an anonymous address subject line, "You don't know who's really on your side." Attached was a single image, a blurry photo of her leaving her apartment with Naomi earlier that week. Her chest tightened. Surveillance. She forwarded it to Aisha Monroe, the attorney, with a single line. "It's starting again." Aisha called minutes later. "Celeste, you need security detail. I need courage." Celeste replied softly. "Security doesn't stop corruption. Exposure does." Still, she agreed to limited protection to trusted agents who would remain discreet. Naomi protested, but Celeste reassured her. It's precaution, not fear. Days passed, filled with rebuilding and reflection. She initiated the Equal Sky Initiative, a sweeping reform inside Aerovista that mandated bias training, anonymous complaint platforms, and equal promotion pathways for all staff. The program's motto, printed across banners in every terminal, read, "Every seat matters." The phrase caught fire online. Customers praised it. Employees began wearing badges engraved with the same words. Yet, amid this wave of progress, Celeste couldn't ignore the unease that lingered. One evening, Harold visited her office carrying a document folder. His face was tense. We found something else wire transfers from Sloane's private account. He's funding a shell group buying Aero Vista shares quietly. He's trying to retake control from the shadows. Celeste exhaled slowly. Then, it's time to stop shadows from pretending they're walls. She looked out at the night sky, planes lined up like strings of light on the runway. He wants a battle of ownership. I'll give him one, just not the kind he expects. Naomi entered moments later, holding her mother's coat. "You're leaving, Celeste said, to meet someone who still believes change is possible." Naomi frowned, who Celeste smiled faintly, a banker with a conscience. When she left the office that night, the city felt sharper, alive with quiet electricity. In the distance, thunder rolled a storm forming beyond the skyline. She didn't fear it. Storms, she'd learned, only revealed who was sturdy enough to stand. By midnight, she was seated across from Javier in the small downtown cafe. Rain streaked the windows, tapping softly on the glass like a secret rhythm. Javier leaned in. "You're thinking of buying him out, aren't you?" Celeste's eyes gleamed. "No, I'm thinking of buying the silence around him. Every fund he hides behind. Every partner he uses, I'll make them mine before he realizes they're gone." Javier smiled, half in awe, half in disbelief. "You're not fighting him anymore, are you?" Celeste sipped her coffee. "No, Javier, I'm ending him quietly." As lightning flashed outside, she whispered to herself, "He stole my dignity once. Now I'll take his kingdom piece by piece until there's nothing left but the truth." The following week brought a chill wind across Houston, as if the weather itself sensed the brewing confrontation. Inside Aero Vista headquarters, Dr. Celeste Morgan stood at the edge of the panoramic window, watching a plane ascend into the silver-gray clouds. Every takeoff reminded her of the same truth: flight was never about power. It was about balance, the right lift, the right wind, the right faith. Naomi entered carrying 2 cups of tea. "You've been staring at that window for 20 minutes, she said softly. "Are you thinking or waiting?" Celeste smiled faintly. "Both. Sloane's next move will come soon. Men like him can't stand the quiet." Naomi sat across from her. "You've already exposed Greg, stabilized the company, and launched Equal Sky. Isn't that enough for now?" Her mother's eyes softened. Enough is a word people use when they're tired, not when they're finished. The door opened, and Harold stepped in, coat still wet from rain. "We have confirmation," he said. "Sloane's been funneling funds through Meridian Capital. It's a front controlled by his cousin. They've been quietly buying Aero Vista stock through smaller firms. If he keeps going, he could hit 20% ownership in a month." Javier's voice came through the speakerphone. "He's building influence faster than expected. If he reaches that threshold, he can call for a shareholder vote. It could undo everything you've built." Celeste listened quietly, then turned toward Harold. "How much would it cost to buy Meridian itself?" Harold blinked. "You want to buy his front company?" "Yes," she said simply. "If you cut the roots, the tree can't stand." He exhaled. "That's bold even for you." "Bold doesn't frighten me," she replied. "Mediocrity does." By evening, Javier had arranged a meeting with Clara Weiss, a Swiss banker known for discretion and moral clarity, rare traits in her line of work. They met over video conference. Clara's sharp features softened when she recognized Celeste. "Dr. Morgan, I've followed your story. You're remarkable, Celeste offered a humble smile. I'm just persistent. I understand you want to purchase Meridian Capital, Clara said. That's not simple. Sloan has buried his holdings beneath layers of shell corporations. Then let's dig, Celeste replied. If corruption hides in the dark, I intend to turn on every light. For the next week, they worked tirelessly. Javier tracked the money trail across jurisdictions. Harold negotiated quiet partnerships with reform-driven investors. Linda Cho leveraged her board influence to keep Sloan's name off the agenda. It was a dance one wrong move, and Sloan would see them coming. One evening, Naomi walked into the office to find her mother asleep at her desk, her glasses still on, pen in hand. The sight tugged at her heart. She placed a blanket over Celeste's shoulders and whispered, "You're changing the world. Mom, just don't let it change you." Celeste stirred slightly, murmuring, "I'm fine." "You're not," Naomi whispered. "You just refuse to stop." The next morning, news broke that Sloan had announced his return to corporate life, branding himself as a consultant for strategic reinvestment in aviation. It was a thinly veiled threat, a message to Celeste that he wasn't done. When Harold showed her the article, Celeste merely smiled. Let him talk. Every boast is a breadcrumb for the truth to follow. Meanwhile, Heather Grant reached out again. Her voice on the phone trembled but carried a new strength. "Dr. Morgan, I've heard whispers Sloan's people are trying to recruit old staff, offering money for silence. They're rewriting history." Celeste thanked her. "Then we'll write it louder." That afternoon, she called a town hall meeting for Aero Vista employees. Thousands joined virtually. Standing before the company logo, Celeste began. "You've heard the rumors, you've seen the headlines, but here's what matters. You're the ones keeping this company alive. Not me, not the board, not the stockholders. You—" Her tone softened. "We can't erase what happened, but we can decide what happens next. Every flight we launch, every passenger we greet, every voice we listen to, that's how we win. Not through revenge, through rebuilding." The chat feed exploded with messages of support. Pilots, flight attendants, ground crew all pledging loyalty not to the brand, but to her vision. It was no longer about Aero Vista, it was about justice that moved with wings. Later that night, Javier called. His tone was excited. "We did it. Meridian Capital's main partner just agreed to sell. With Clara's help, we can acquire controlling interest by Friday. Sloan won't see it until it's over." Celeste allowed herself a rare grin. "Then let's make Friday the day the sky changes hands again." But victories never came without a cost. 2 days before the deal, her driver noticed a black car tailing them from the office to her apartment. The same car stayed parked across the street for hours. Naomi wanted to call the police, but Celeste refused to panic. "Fear thrives on attention," she said. "Let it starve." That night, she received a phone call from a number she didn't recognize. When she answered, silence greeted her. Then a voice, calm and cold. "You think buying Meridian will stop me?" It was Sloan. Celeste said nothing. He continued, "You've made this personal. You could have stayed quiet, enjoyed your sympathy, but you had to turn it into a crusade." Finally, she spoke. "No, Martin, you made it personal the day you decided dignity had a price. I'm just reminding you what it costs to forget that." He laughed a hollow, bitter sound. "You're playing a dangerous game." "I'm not playing," she said softly. "I'm rebuilding. You should try it sometime." She hung up before he could answer. By Friday morning, the acquisition was finalized. Clara's network confirmed the transaction. Meridian Capital was now owned by an entity under Celeste's Reform Consortium. Sloane's financial anchor had just dissolved beneath him. At noon, the markets reacted. Aerovista's shares soared. Investors, previously wary, now hailed her as a visionary. Harold entered her office, grinning like a proud father. "You've done it. Celeste?" He's finished. But Celeste didn't smile. "No, Harold, he's desperate, and desperate men are unpredictable." She was right. That evening, as she left the building, her phone buzzed again, another message from an unknown number. This one contained a single sentence. "Check your bank account." When she logged in, she froze. A transfer of $5 million had appeared in her name from an offshore account tied to Sloane's network. It was a trap, a planted transaction meant to frame her for embezzlement. Naomi's eyes widened as she saw the screen. "Mom, we have to call Aisha. This could destroy everything." Celeste's voice was steady. "It won't, because this time I'm ready for his lies. Within the hour." She contacted Javier and Clara. Using their records, they traced the forged transaction path, documenting every false trail. By dawn, the evidence was compiled, a digital footprint proving the money had never passed through her control. Aisha filed the report directly with federal investigators before the story could break. When Sloane's allies tried to leak it, they were met instead with headlines that read, "Attempted financial sabotage against Aerovista CEO exposed." Sloane's silence after that was deafening. That night, Celeste sat on her balcony with Naomi. The city lights shimmered below like scattered stars. For once, the air felt still. Naomi leaned against her shoulder. "Do you ever get tired of fighting?" Celeste smiled softly. "Only when I forget why I started." Naomi tilted her head. "And why did you?" Celeste looked up at the sky, where a distant plane blinked across the darkness. "Because one day, a stranger decided I didn't belong in a seat I paid for, and I decided I'd spend the rest of my life making sure no one else felt that small again." Naomi's eyes glistened. "Then I guess the sky really does belong to you now." Celeste chuckled. "No, sweetheart, it belongs to all of us. I just had to remind them of that." The morning after the financial sabotage failed, a strange quiet settled over Aerovista's glass tower. For the first time in months, no reporters hovered near the lobby, no protests lined the sidewalk. It was the stillness that comes when a storm holds its breath before breaking again. Dr. Celeste Morgan arrived early, as always. Her reflection in the elevator doors looked tired but unwavering. She had survived slander, betrayal, and theft, but now came the hardest part, keeping the victory from collapsing under its own weight. In her office, Harold was already waiting, a folder spread open across the table. "Morning, Celeste. The feds are done investigating the fake transfer. Sloane's associates are facing charges for digital fraud. He's cornered." Celeste removed her coat, setting it neatly on the back of her chair. Cornered men still have claws. Javier joined through the screen, his voice crisp. "We traced his holdings. He's got one last asset, a private fund called Horizon Delta, operating out of the Cayman Islands. It's small, but powerful enough to influence minority shareholders. He's not done." Celeste leaned forward, her tone calm. "Then let's end it with dignity, not vengeance." Harold frowned. "After everything he's done, you still want to give him dignity?" She met his gaze. If I fight him on his terms, I become him. Before they could continue, Naomi entered carrying a breakfast tray. You all need food, she said firmly. Even revolutions need oatmeal. Celeste laughed softly, the first real laugh in weeks. You sound like your grandmother. Good, Naomi replied. Grandma believed in feeding the fighters. As they ate, Linda Cho arrived, her heels clicking with purpose. We've got a problem, she said, holding up a tablet. Someone leaked confidential documents about the Equal Sky Initiative. They're twisting it to make it look like an internal propaganda campaign to distract from financial losses. Harold groaned. It never stops. Celeste read the headline on the screen. Aerovista's New Morality Campaign, PR, disguised as progress. The article accused her of performative reform words like virtue signaling and corporate optics littered the text. Celeste sighed, setting the tablet down. Every step toward change makes noise. Noise means we're moving. Linda hesitated. Should we issue a statement? No, Celeste said. We'll answer with action, not rebuttals. That afternoon, she visited one of Aerovista's busiest terminals at Dallas-Fort Worth. Cameras followed discreetly, though she ignored them. She spoke to pilots, attendants, mechanics, everyone whose nameplates bore the Aerovista logo. A young flight attendant named Maya Ortiz approached nervously. Dr. Morgan, can I say something? Of course. I was there when that video of you first went viral, the one where you were denied your seat, Maya said. I promised myself that if I ever got promoted, I'd never let anyone feel that way on my flight. Celeste smiled warmly. That's how change begins. Quiet promises whispered between strangers. She spent the next hours listening, shaking hands, writing notes in her small leather journal. Every voice mattered, each one a fragment of the company's broken soul she was trying to mend. When she returned to headquarters, Naomi met her at the door. Mom, you have to see this. She turned on the television. Breaking news, Martin Sloan, once untouchable, now stood before reporters outside a courthouse. His face was pale, his voice weary. I made mistakes, he said, but this witch hunt against me has gone too far. Dr. Morgan has turned this company into a personal crusade. She's not saving Aerovista, she's politicizing it. Celeste watched silently. Harold muttered, He's framing himself as the victim. That's what men like him do, she said softly. When they lose control, they pretend it's theft. The next day, Aerovista's communications team prepared a response, but Celeste stopped them. No statements, she ordered, just results. Let the work defend itself. Instead, she instructed Naomi to organize a public event, Aerovista Community Day. It would bring together staff, passengers, and activists to discuss inclusion in travel, turning negative headlines into dialogue. The event took place at an open hangar, decorated simply with banners reading "Every seat, every soul." Hundreds attended. Journalists waited for fireworks, but what they got was quiet sincerity. Celeste took the stage in a simple cream suit. When I was denied my seat, she began. I thought justice meant punishment. I was wrong. Justice means transformation. The goal isn't to humiliate those who hurt us. It's to teach the system that allowed it. Her voice wavered with emotion. This company once treated respect like a premium upgrade. We're here to prove it's a birthright. The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras captured tears in the eyes of employees who had never felt seen before. After the event, A man in a gray suit approached her, a stranger with a press badge. "Dr. Morgan," he said quietly. "You don't know me, but I worked for Sloan once. You should know he's planning something bigger. He's not fighting for money anymore. He's fighting to ruin you." Celeste met his gaze steadily. Then he'll have to break what he couldn't build. That evening, she gathered Harold, Linda, and Javier. "Sloan's desperate. That makes him dangerous. I want all internal data double encrypted, all board communications secure, and reach out to Aisha. If he crosses the legal line again, we strike first." Harold nodded grimly. "You think he'll try again?" Celeste's voice was quiet but certain. "Yes. The man who humiliated me on that flight didn't just hate me. He hated what I represented. And now, that fear wears a suit and hides behind lawyers." Days later, her prediction came true. A whistleblower from a rival airline contacted Javier, revealing Sloan's latest scheme. He was planning to leak manipulated accident statistics to make Aero Vista look unsafe. The plan involved bribed regulators and falsified maintenance data. Celeste felt a familiar coldness settle in her chest. "He's willing to endanger lives just to prove a point," she whispered. "Then we expose him before he moves," Javier said. For 3 tense days, they compiled evidence. Naomi handled public relations quietly, preparing statements for when the truth surfaced. Celeste coordinated directly with the Department of Transportation, ensuring the investigation would land hard. When the news broke, it was explosive. Former CEO behind attempted data manipulation scandal. Sloan's network crumbled overnight. Arrest warrants followed within hours. For the first time, the man who had mocked her integrity faced a system he could no longer buy. Celeste didn't celebrate. She stood on the observation deck of the airport, watching planes rise through sunset streaks of gold and violet. Beside her, Naomi placed a hand on her arm. "You did it. You beat him." Celeste shook her head gently. "No, I outlasted him. Beating someone isn't victory. Outlasting them with grace, that's survival." A soft wind brushed against her hair as she whispered, "He tried to own the sky. I just wanted to make it fair again." As night fell, she closed her eyes for a moment, letting the hum of engines and the murmur of travelers fill the air. For the first time, it sounded peaceful. Not a battlefield, but a promise. The world would keep spinning, planes would keep flying, and somewhere, perhaps on a quiet flight she'd never take, someone who looked like her would sit in first class without question, without stares, without proof needed. That thought made her smile. The day after the Department of Transportation announced formal charges against Martin Sloan, a deep calm descended over Aero Vista's headquarters. For the first time since Celeste Morgan took power, the halls hummed with something new relief. Employees greeted one another with smiles that didn't feel forced. The tension that had hung in the air for months seemed to lift, like fog after a storm. Celeste stood by her office window, the Texas sunlight pouring across the desk, warming her hands. She didn't smile, not yet. Peace was a delicate thing, she thought, and even victory needed tending. Harold entered, carrying a stack of printed letters. "Morning, Madam Chair," he said with a grin. "You might want to see this. It's mail, actual paper mail from passengers. Hundreds of them." She raised an eyebrow. "Paper, I thought that art was extinct." He laughed, setting the bundle down. "Apparently, not when people want to thank you. Most are stories, folks saying your reforms changed how they travel. Some are just handwritten notes saying, "Thank you for seeing us." Celeste picked up one envelope and opened it carefully. Inside was a letter from a woman named Lydia Parker, a grandmother from South Carolina. Her handwriting was neat, deliberate. "Dear Dr. Morgan, I flew for the first time in 20 years last week. I was nervous, but a flight attendant noticed and sat beside me before takeoff, just to hold my hand. She said it was Aero Vista's way now. I cried the whole flight, but they were good tears. I just wanted to say I felt seen, I felt safe. Thank you." Celeste read the words twice, her eyes softening. "That's worth more than a press release." Harold nodded. "You've done more than reform a company. Celeste, you've rebuilt trust." Before she could respond, Naomi appeared in the doorway, phone in hand. "Mom, CNN wants a sit-down interview. They're doing a segment called Leaders Who Change the Skies." Celeste chuckled. Catchy title. Naomi's eyes sparkled. "You should do it. Tell the whole story on your terms." She hesitated for a moment. For months, her life had been headlines and controversy. But maybe it was time to shift the narrative from defense to purpose. "All right," she said. "Set it up." The interview took place 3 days later in a quiet studio overlooking downtown Houston. The host, a poised journalist named Eleanor Brooks, greeted her warmly. Cameras rolled, lights glowed, and for an hour, Celeste answered questions about her journey from the humiliation in first class to the corporate transformation that followed. When asked how she endured the storm, Celeste smiled gently. "Because anger builds walls, but purpose builds bridges. I didn't want revenge. I wanted reform." Eleanor leaned forward. "And do you feel justice has been served?" Celeste paused. "Justice isn't a verdict. It's a process. I think it's begun." The interview aired that evening and instantly went viral. Hashtags celebrating her leadership trended nationwide. Viewers called her the woman who turned pain into policy. Even late-night hosts spoke about her story not as tragedy, but as inspiration. But Celeste didn't dwell on praise. The following morning, she gathered her leadership team. "Our work isn't finished. I want Equal Sky expanded beyond Aero Vista. We'll partner with universities, training schools, and other airlines. We'll teach equality as a standard, not a slogan." Linda's eyes widened. "That's ambitious. You'd be turning it into an international initiative." Celeste nodded. "Exactly. The higher you fly, the wider your view must be." Harold looked thoughtful. "We could launch it under a foundation, the Morgan Institute for Ethical Aviation." Naomi grinned. "I like that. Sounds like something Grandma would brag about at church." Celeste laughed softly. "Then it's settled. Let's build something that outlives all of us." Weeks passed, filled with planning and partnerships. The Equal Sky message spread across industries, hospitality, transportation, even tech firms adopting similar inclusion frameworks. For once, progress didn't feel like a fight. It felt like a current, pulling good people forward. But amid the momentum, a letter arrived on Celeste's desk that froze her in place. It was from the correctional facility where Sloan awaited trial. Inside, written in his sharp, familiar handwriting, was a single sentence even from the ground. "I can still see the sky." She read it twice, unsure whether it was bitterness or resignation. Then she folded it neatly and tucked it away. "Let him look," she whispered. "He's just not flying anymore." That night, as Celeste and Naomi sat on their balcony, The city lights shimmered below like scattered embers. Naomi poured 2 cups of chamomile tea. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "When all this started, did you ever think you'd forgive him?" Celeste's eyes drifted to the horizon. "Forgiveness isn't about him. Naomi, it's about not carrying his shadow into my sky." Naomi leaned against her shoulder. "You make it sound simple." "It isn't," Celeste admitted. "But healing never is. You just do it piece by piece until it stops hurting." The following morning brought another surprise, a letter from the White House. Celeste unfolded it slowly. Reading aloud, Dr. Celeste Morgan, in recognition of your extraordinary commitment to civil rights and ethical leadership, you are hereby invited to attend the National Medal of Freedom ceremony this spring. Naomi gasped. "Mom, that's huge." Celeste smiled softly. "It's not mine alone. It belongs to everyone who stood beside me when the world told us to sit down." Word spread quickly. The company held an impromptu celebration in the hangar where she had once announced her reforms. Employees applauded, confetti rained down, and for a brief moment, joy filled every corner of Aero Vista. During her speech, Celeste looked out over the crowd, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I've spent my life learning that dignity isn't something anyone can give you, it's something you carry, even when others try to take it away. This company forgot that once, but now we remember." She paused, scanning faces young and old. The sky doesn't belong to the powerful, it belongs to the persistent. The applause thundered through the hangar. Tears glistened in eyes across the room, from veteran pilots to first-year attendants. Maya Ortiz, the young woman from Dallas, approached her afterward with trembling hands. "Dr. Morgan, I just wanted to say because of you. I applied to become a captain. I never thought someone like me could—" Celeste's heart swelled. "You already are. Maya, you just needed the world to catch up." Later that evening, Celeste sat quietly in her office, the noise of celebration fading into a comforting hum. She thought of her beginnings, the little girl who had once looked up at the sky from a segregated schoolyard, dreaming of something bigger than fairness. Harold entered with a gentle knock. "You did it, Celeste?" She looked up, smiling. "No, Harold, we did it, and we're not done." He nodded, pride softening his expression. "You really believe this can last?" Celeste gazed out at the fading sunset. "Yes, because people like Maya, Lydia, Heather, they'll make sure it does. Change isn't a headline, it's a habit." As she turned off the lights and left the office, her reflection caught for a moment in the glass wall, older, steadier, free. She whispered to it. The seat was never the victory. The journey was. Outside, the sky stretched vast and open, a living testament to everything she had fought for. Planes lifted into the twilight, their wings flashing silver as they disappeared into clouds that no longer looked so far away. And in that moment, Celeste Morgan finally allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the sky did belong to everyone after all. Winter crept in quietly that year. The morning frost on the glass walls of Aero Vista's tower painted pale rivers across Celeste Morgan's window. The city below still moved, alive with purpose, but inside her office, a rare stillness lingered. It had been 6 months since the company's rebirth, and though the public hailed her as a modern icon, she knew transformation was never as easy as applause made it seem. Celeste sat with her notebook open, its pages filled with dates, names, and questions, across from her. Harold sipped coffee, scanning the morning reports. "The numbers are strong," he said. "Customer satisfaction up 38%, employee retention at an all-time high. You've rebuilt the brand. Celeste, maybe it's time to breathe." She smiled faintly. "Breathing is easy. Building something that lasts, that's the hard part." Naomi appeared at the doorway, her scarf still dusted with snowflakes. "Mom, you've been here since 6. Again." Celeste looked up, pretending innocence. Old habits. Naomi walked over, placing a small lunch container on the desk. "New rule," she said. "You eat before any more meetings." Harold chuckled. "I second that." Celeste sighed dramatically but took the food. "You two act like I'm made of glass." Naomi leaned on the edge of the desk. "No, Mom, we just don't want you to forget that even the strongest wings need rest." Celeste's expression softened. "You're starting to sound like your father." For a heartbeat, the air stilled. They didn't talk about him often, the late Marcus Brooks, her husband and Naomi's father, a journalist who had died in a car accident years ago while investigating corporate corruption. He'd been the one who taught Celeste that truth wasn't a weapon. It was a light. Naomi's smile flickered. Maybe that's not a bad thing. Celeste reached across the desk, squeezing her daughter's hand gently. "No, it's not." That afternoon, the board gathered for a quarterly briefing. Linda Cho opened with good news profits stable, investor confidence strong, yet her tone carried hesitation. "There's something else," she said. "We've received acquisition offers, large ones. Other airlines want to buy into our new ethics model. They're offering partnerships, but some want control." Harold frowned. Control means compromise. They'll dilute everything Celeste built. Celeste folded her hands. "We can't refuse to grow out of fear, but we'll grow on our terms." Linda nodded. "Then maybe we create a global coalition instead of selling equity. Share the model, not the ownership." Celeste smiled. "Exactly. Change isn't for sale, it's for sharing." Later that evening, she walked through the hangar where maintenance crews worked under bright floodlights. The scent of fuel and steel reminded her of how far she'd come from being dragged off a plane in humiliation to standing here, reshaping the very skies that once rejected her. She stopped beside a young mechanic named Deshaun Riley, who was inspecting the landing gear of a plane. "How's she flying?" Celeste asked. He grinned. "Better than ever. Ma'am, new systems, better morale. Folks actually care again. That's what makes a plane safe," she said. "Not just machines people." As she turned to leave, Deshaun called out, "Dr. Morgan, my mom told me to tell you something." She paused. "What's that?" she said. "Tell that woman she gave my son wings." Celeste blinked back sudden tears. "Your mom sounds wise." "She is," he said proudly. "She's the reason I applied here." Walking back through the hangar, Celeste felt something shift inside her. It wasn't pride, it was gratitude. Quiet, heavy, humbling gratitude. The following week brought a new challenge. A severe winter storm grounded multiple Aero Vista flights across the Midwest. Stranded passengers filled terminals, news cameras descended, and reporters speculated if the crisis would test Celeste's leadership once again. In the command center, she stood surrounded by screens tracking flight patterns and weather updates. "We can't control the skies," she said calmly, "but we can control how we treat the people waiting beneath them." She ordered all affected passengers to receive full hotel accommodations, meal vouchers, and open communication lines. Then she did something no CEO had done before she personally joined the customer service team at the terminal. Cameras caught her handing out blankets and coffee, speaking with stranded families. One man, a weary father holding a sleeping toddler, looked at her in disbelief. "You're her, aren't you?" The woman from the story, Celeste, smiled. "I am, but today I'm just here to help." He chuckled, shaking his head. Guess customer service really did change. By midnight, the storm cleared, flights resumed, and the viral footage of Celeste working alongside her staff spread across social media. But this time, there was no outrage, only admiration. The caption that trended for days was simple: "She leads from the ground." The next morning, Naomi entered her office holding her phone. "You're everywhere again," she teased. "Even my yoga instructor reposted your picture." Celeste groaned playfully. "I should start charging for lessons in humility." Harold stepped in moments later, carrying a letter. "This came by courier," he said. "It's from someone you might not expect." Celeste took the envelope, reading the return address: Federal Correctional Institute, Denver. Her breath caught. Sloan again. Inside was a short message: "I used to think control was power. Now I see restraint is... You were right. The sky doesn't belong to us. It belongs to the ones who keep it open." For the first time, she didn't feel anger when reading his name, only a quiet release, as though an old wound had finally stopped aching. She folded the letter carefully and placed it in her drawer beside the first one he'd sent. That night, as she sat on her balcony with Naomi, the city lights twinkled like scattered stars. Naomi broke the silence first. "Do you ever think about what's next?" Celeste smiled softly. "Always. But lately, I've been thinking less about what I'll do and more about what others will." Naomi tilted her head. "You mean the next generation?" "Yes," Celeste said. "I want this movement to belong to them. I'm just a page in the book. They'll write the rest." Naomi rested her head against her mother's shoulder. "You know, when I tell people you're my mom, they say, 'That can't be easy.'" Celeste laughed gently. "And what do you tell them?" "I tell them it's like living with gravity. You don't always notice it, but you know it's holding everything up." Celeste's eyes shimmered. "That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me." In the days that followed, Aerovista launched its global partnership under the Morgan Institute. Airlines across Europe and Africa signed on to adopt her equality framework. News outlets called it the Sky Pact, and governments began citing it in policy discussions. One evening, as Celeste reviewed the reports, Harold said quietly, "You realize you've done something rare. You didn't just survive a system, you changed it." She smiled faintly. "Change isn't mine, Harold. It's ours. It always has been." As she prepared to leave for the night, she glanced once more out the window. A plane lifted gracefully into the twilight, its lights flickering like distant promises. "Every time one of them takes off," she whispered, "it reminds me of that day, the day I was told I didn't belong in first class. Now, I realize I never needed a seat. I just needed a sky that saw me." Her voice trembled with emotion, but her heart felt light. The sky had once rejected her. Now, it carried her legacy in every direction. Spring arrived with the kind of golden warmth that made everything feel lighter. From her office window, Dr. Celeste Morgan could see the city stretching wide and alive, the skyline reflecting soft morning light. She had spent years fighting storms, both literal and moral, and now, for For the first time, the air felt still. A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. Naomi entered carrying a folder and 2 coffees, the steam rising in ribbons. "You're trending again," she said, setting the drinks down. "Apparently, your speech at the Civil Rights Forum last night broke viewership records. Someone edited it with piano music and posted it to TikTok." Celeste chuckled. "Piano? Really? That's dramatic." Naomi grinned. "So are you, Mom," before Celeste could answer. Harold walked in, tablet in hand. "Sorry to ruin the good mood, but there's news. Aerovista's expansion into South America hit turbulence. There's a labor strike brewing in Sao Paulo. Some of the new international partners are resisting Equal Sky's wage parity policy." Celeste's expression hardened slightly. "They signed that policy voluntarily. They're saying the model's too costly. They want exemptions." She rose from her chair. "Then they want the brand without the values. That's not negotiable." Harold sighed. "We could mediate, at least buy time." Celeste nodded slowly. "No fighting, just conversation, but the standard stays." By noon, she was on a video call with the regional leaders. The connection flickered as executives in suits argued in Portuguese and English. "Dr. Morgan," one of them said, "your reforms are admirable, but our economy is different. We can't pay flight crews the same as U.S. staff." Celeste listened quietly, then spoke with steady conviction. "When I was dragged off that plane years ago, no one argued that the rules were different for me because of my skin. Inequality doesn't care about borders, it's still wrong. Either we lead with principle, or we're just painting fairness in new colors." The room fell silent. After a long pause, the Brazilian director nodded. "You make a point, Senora. Let's find a way to make it work." When the call ended, Harold exhaled in relief. "You're terrifying in the most polite way possible." Celeste smiled faintly. "I don't terrify." "Harold," I remind. Later that afternoon, Naomi walked into her office again. "Mom, you have a visitor. Says it's urgent." Celeste looked up as a young woman stepped in, nervously holding a folder. "Dr. Morgan, my name's Amara Lee. I'm a journalist from the Globe Review. I'm writing an expose on corporate ethics and I wanted your insight." Celeste gestured to a chair. "Please, sit. What's your focus?" Amara hesitated. "Actually, it's about you, about what it takes to hold power without letting it change you." Celeste leaned back, intrigued. "That's a dangerous subject." The journalist smiled nervously. "Maybe, but people see you as a symbol now. I want to show the person." Celeste studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right, ask me anything, but I'll only answer truthfully." They spoke for over an hour. Amara's questions were sharp but respectful. She asked about the first-class incident, the lawsuits, the redemption, the Equal Sky initiative, and the growing movement it had inspired. At one point, Amara leaned forward. "You forgave Sloan?" How Celeste paused, her voice soft. "Because hate is a seatbelt. It keeps you stuck where the pain happened. I wanted to fly again." When the interview ended, Amara thanked her. "You've given me more than a story. You've given me perspective." After she left, Naomi entered quietly. "She reminds me of you," she said. Celeste smiled. Then the future's in good hands. That night, Celeste attended a charity gala hosted by the Morgan Institute. The hall shimmered with gold light and quiet music. Investors, activists, and former rivals mingled under one roof. On stage, banners read, "The sky belongs to everyone." As she stepped up to the podium, applause rippled through the room. Her speech was simple, heartfelt. "When this journey began, I thought justice was an action. Now I know it's a continuum, a promise renewed every day we choose decency over ease." She looked out over the crowd. "This isn't my story anymore. It's yours. Every person who chooses fairness in a quiet moment on a flight, in an office, in a decision no one sees, that's how we keep flying." The applause swelled, and she caught Naomi's proud gaze near the back of the room. After the event, as guests filtered out, Harold joined her by the balcony overlooking the city. "You ever think about what comes after this?" Celeste tilted her head. "You mean after Aero Vista? After everything? You've built an empire of ethics. What's next?" She smiled thoughtfully. Maybe silence, maybe teaching, maybe just watching others rise higher. Harold raised an eyebrow. "Retirement doesn't suit you." "Neither did leadership," she said with a wink. "Yet here we are." As they laughed, the sound of distant thunder rolled through the night sky. Celeste looked up. "Storm's coming." Harold frowned. Weather report said clear. "Not that kind," she murmured. 2 days later, her instincts proved right. Early that morning, the news exploded with headlines: "Former Aerovista executives file lawsuit alleging hostile leadership environment." Naomi burst into the office, phone in hand. "Mom, they're accusing you of reverse discrimination, saying your reforms punished white male executives." Celeste read the article calmly. "They're not suing me. They're suing change." Harold looked grim. Still, this could get messy. They're backed by conservative media outlets. It's political now. Celeste took a long breath. "Then we won't play politics. We'll play truth." She held a press conference that same afternoon. Cameras filled the room. Reporters waited for anger, defensiveness, but Celeste gave them neither. "Progress always feels like loss to those who benefited from the imbalance," she said. "But equality isn't a punishment. It's a correction." Her tone was firm, but not harsh. If fairness feels like oppression, perhaps it's time to ask why comfort depended on someone else's silence. The room erupted in applause. That single line replayed across networks for days, quoted in editorials and speeches. What could have been a scandal became another milestone. That evening, she returned home exhausted. Naomi waited with dinner already made. "You were magnificent," she said. "That line about comfort and silence, it's everywhere." Celeste smiled faintly. "Pouring tea. It's not a line. It's the truth I wish someone had told me 50 years ago." Naomi hesitated. "Do you ever wish none of it had happened, that you'd just taken another flight that day?" Celeste looked at her daughter for a long time before answering. "No, sweetheart, because that humiliation became a doorway. I just had to walk through it." As the night deepened, the city outside glowed with quiet life. Celeste sat by the window, watching planes cut through clouds like silver arrows. She thought of the journey, the pain, the triumph, the people who believed in her when the world doubted. She whispered to herself, almost as a prayer, "Justice isn't a destination, it's how you fly." Her reflection in the glass looked older, softer, but unbroken. The woman who had once been told she didn't belong had rebuilt the very system that tried to erase her, and somewhere far above. An Aero Vista flight climbed higher into the night, its engines steady, its passengers safe, each one unknowingly carried by the legacy of a woman who refused to be grounded. A month after the lawsuit made headlines, the country had already shifted its gaze to the next controversy, as it always did. But for Dr. Celeste Morgan, the echoes lingered. She had won in court again, but each victory carried its own quiet fatigue. The press painted her as unshakable, but she knew better. Resilience was not absence of exhaustion, it was simply continuing despite it. The morning sunlight slipped through the blinds of her Houston penthouse, glinting off framed photographs that lined the wall snapshots of Aero Vista employees. Family, speeches, awards. They weren't trophies, they were timestamps. Proof of a journey carved through storms. Naomi entered, carrying 2 mugs. "You've been staring at that wall for 10 minutes, she said softly. "Are you thinking or remembering?" Celeste took a sip of coffee, smiling faintly. "Both. I think the older you get, the two start to feel the same." Naomi sat beside her, resting her head against her shoulder. "It's okay to rest. Mom, you've carried the sky long enough?" Celeste chuckled. "You sound like you're writing my eulogy." Naomi frowned. "Don't joke about that." Celeste reached over, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "I'm not going anywhere, but I do wonder what the sky will look like after I'm gone." That afternoon, Aero Vista hosted a new program at the Morgan Institute, the Horizon Fellowship, designed to fund young women of color studying aviation leadership. Dozens of students filled the atrium, their laughter echoing through the hall. Celeste moved among them quietly, shaking hands, listening to stories. One young woman stood out, tall, with braided hair and calm confidence. She introduced herself as Kayla Grant, Dr. Morgan. "I've followed your journey since I was 12. I watched the video of that flight, what they did to you. It made me furious. But seeing what you built after, it made me want to fly, too." Celeste's eyes softened. "Then promise me something." "Kayla, anything. Fly with grace, not anger. Anger burns fuel too quickly." Kayla smiled. "Then I'll fly on hope instead." Later, Harold joined Celeste in her office. "That girl Kayla reminds me of you," he said. Sharp eyes, steady voice. "You sure you're ready to hand this legacy off?" Celeste looked out the window at the skyline. "Legacies don't belong to people. They belong to purpose. If I hold it too tightly, it dies with me." He nodded slowly. "Then, I suppose the sky's in good hands." For weeks, things were calm. The airline continued to flourish. International partnerships deepened, and even the lawsuit that once threatened to tarnish her reputation faded into irrelevance. But peace, Celeste had learned, always comes with an expiration date. One evening, Naomi burst into her office. "Mom, have you seen this?" She handed her a tablet showing a viral video. A flight attendant from Aero Vista was being recorded harassing an elderly Hispanic man, accusing him of sitting in the wrong seat. The video had millions of views already, captioned "different faces," same discrimination. Celeste's chest tightened. When was this filmed? Yesterday. Dallas to Chicago. It's everywhere. "Mom, people are saying nothing's changed." Celeste felt a dull ache rise from her gut. She had built systems, trained teams, poured herself into reform, and yet prejudice had found another face, another victim. "Find out who he is," she said firmly. "I want to talk to him personally, within hours." They learned the passenger's name, Miguel Torres. a retired teacher traveling to visit his daughter. Celeste called him herself that night. "Mr. Torres," she began gently. "This is Dr. Morgan from Aero Vista." There was a pause on the line. "The doctor, Morgan," he asked softly. "Yes, sir. And I'm calling to apologize for what you went through and for what we failed to prevent." Miguel's voice was calm, almost forgiving. "You don't owe me that, ma'am. You can't control every person. But I'll tell you what my daughter said. She said seeing you care means maybe the world's changing after all." Celeste closed her eyes. "She sounds wise. She is," he said, chuckling. "She learned it from me. Teachers have to hope, you know. Otherwise, what's the point after the call?" Celeste sat in silence, her hands folded. Naomi entered quietly. "How bad is it?" "Not bad," Celeste said softly. "Just human. That's what makes it hard." The next morning, she flew to Dallas unannounced. Cameras caught her walking through the terminal. Calm and poised, she met with the flight crew involved, not to humiliate, but to understand. Behind closed doors, her tone was measured but firm. "When we forget empathy, we forget why we fly." By afternoon, she held a press briefing not to defend the company, but to renew its promise. Every step forward can still trip. The measure of change isn't perfection, it's persistence. We will keep going until decency becomes instinct, not instruction. The video of her speech spread quickly, drawing praise for its honesty. Even critics admitted she didn't run from accountability, she redefined it. That evening, Harold found her standing alone in the hangar again, the same one where it all began. "You handled it perfectly," he said. Celeste shook her head. "There's no perfect, only progress." He hesitated, then said quietly, "You ever regret buying this airline? You could have retired peacefully, lived quietly," she smiled faintly, "and leave the sky to people who think first class is a privilege for the few. No, some fights are worth never ending." As she walked through the hangar, she stopped beside an old photo pinned to the wall, a black and white image of her first flight uniform from decades ago, back when she'd been one of the first black women in aviation research. She touched the frame gently. "It's funny," she said. "Back then, I wanted to fly higher. Now, I just want everyone else to." That night, Naomi joined her mother for dinner on the balcony. The city glowed below, and a plane streaked across the darkening sky. "You know," Naomi said softly, "every time I see one of those, I think of you." Celeste laughed. "You should think of where it's going, not who it reminds you of." Naomi smiled. "I can do both." A quiet wind passed through the balcony. The scent of jasmine filled the air. Celeste looked up, her eyes reflecting starlight. You ever notice how planes disappear before you expect them to? You watch, and suddenly they're gone. Naomi followed her gaze. "They don't vanish, Mom. They just go where we can't see." Celeste nodded slowly, her lips curling into a small, wistful smile. "Exactly." For the first time in years, she felt peace settle deep in her chest. She knew her time at the helm was nearing its natural close, not as defeat, but as fulfillment. She had rewritten not only a company's history, but perhaps, in some small way, part of the country's, and as the city hummed below, she whispered a quiet promise to herself. May the sky always remember what it once forgot. The world felt different that spring morning, not because anything monumental had happened, but because it hadn't. The news had grown quiet. The boardroom arguments had softened, and for once, the phones in Dr. Celeste Morgan's office didn't ring endlessly. Silence real. Unbroken silence had returned. She sat at her desk, sunlight washing over the polished wood. Outside her window, planes traced thin silver lines across a sky so blue it almost felt new. She could hear the faint hum of the city far below, a symphony of movement that once reminded her of chaos but now sounded like rhythm life continuing on, steady and unbothered. Harold entered, holding 2 envelopes. "Mornin', boss. One's from the FAA, the other's from the Smithsonian." Celeste raised an eyebrow. "I'm guessing one is trouble, and the other is flattery." "Flattery first." He handed her the second envelope. "They want to feature you in a permanent exhibit, Women Who Changed Flight. They're requesting personal artifacts. Maybe your first uniform." Celeste smiled faintly. "I kept it in a box somewhere. Smells like jet fuel and optimism." Harold chuckled. "That should be the title of your biography." Celeste opened the other envelope, scanning the FAA letter. Her brows lifted slightly. "They're inviting Aerovista to collaborate on a federal initiative for equitable air travel. Training programs, recruitment diversification, the works." Harold grinned. "So, the system that once pushed you out now wants your blueprint." "Full circle," she murmured, "but not the end." Later that afternoon, Naomi appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand. "Mom, you've got a message from Kayla Grant." Celeste looked up, the horizon fellow. Naomi nodded, smiling. She just completed her first international flight as co-pilot. Sent a picture of the crew holding a sign that says, "Because of you, we belong up here." Celeste took the tablet, studying the photo for a long moment. The young woman's smile radiated confidence and quiet pride. "She's flying already," Celeste said softly. "Faster than I ever did." "That's the point," Naomi replied. "You made sure she didn't have to wait 50 years. That night, Celeste attended a small dinner hosted by the board. It wasn't a gala or press event, just family, friends, and colleagues gathered in the Aerovista headquarters rooftop garden. String lights glowed above, casting warm halos across the table. Linda raised her glass. To Celeste Morgan, the woman who turned turbulence into transformation. Applause followed, but Celeste lifted her hand modestly. "You all make it sound like I did it alone. I didn't. I just refused to stop when it hurt." Naomi squeezed her hand under the table, whispering, "That's exactly why they love you." After dinner, as the crowd dispersed, Harold lingered by her side. "You know, you could retire right now and the world would still talk about you 50 years from today." Celeste looked out over the city lights, her tone thoughtful. "But would the world learn from me, or just remember me?" Harold smiled. "Both, if it's lucky." In the weeks that followed, she began delegating responsibilities quietly, meeting with younger leaders, empowering them to take ownership of projects she once guarded closely. Javier Ruiz took over global finance operations. Linda handled the new partnerships. Naomi, though hesitant, accepted her mother's offer to chair the Morgan Institute. "You built this with your name," Naomi said one evening, pacing the office. "What if I fail it?" Celeste rose, walking to her daughter's side. "The name doesn't matter if the mission survives. Failing isn't falling, it's refusing to get back up." Naomi's voice softened. "You really are ready to let go, aren't you?" Celeste nodded. "I've held the sky long enough. Time to see how it looks in someone else's hands." A few days later, an invitation arrived from Washington. D.C. the Medal of Freedom ceremony she'd been nominated for months before. The letter was formal, but the message was simple. She would be honored for her lifelong commitment to justice, dignity, and equality in American aviation. When the day came, she wore a simple ivory dress and her late husband Marcus's old watch. Naomi walked beside her, radiant in blue. As they entered the grand hall, Celeste felt a ripple of emotion, not pride, but peace. During the ceremony, the president spoke about her legacy. Dr. Celeste Morgan turned pain into purpose and changed an industry forever. She proved that leadership isn't power, it's stewardship. When Celeste stepped up to receive the medal, the applause was thunderous. Cameras flashed. Tears glimmered in the audience. Yet, as she stood there, she didn't see the crowd or the stage. She saw a small airplane window. Years ago, a torn ticket in her hand, a flight attendant's cold stare, and the quiet humiliation that had once defined her. Only now. It didn't hurt. It felt distant, like a story she'd read long ago about someone else. After the ceremony, as they exited into the spring air, Naomi asked softly, "How do you feel?" Celeste exhaled. Lighter, like the sky finally forgave me for ever doubting it. That evening, back in her Houston apartment, she sat on the balcony with a cup of tea. The medal rested on the table beside her, gleaming under the moonlight. She thought of all the faces: Heather, Harold, Linda, Maya, Miguel, Kayla, each one a thread in a tapestry she hadn't realized she was weaving. The phone buzzed. It was a message from Miguel Torres, the retired teacher she'd spoken to weeks earlier. "Saw your ceremony tonight. My granddaughter says she wants to be a pilot. Told her the sky's wide enough for all of us. Thank you." Celeste smiled. That single message meant more than the medal. Later that night, Harold called. "You should get some sleep." "Celeste, big day tomorrow, your farewell announcement." "I'm not calling it that," she said. "It's not farewell, it's flight handover." He laughed. "Same difference." "Not to me," she replied softly. "I'm not leaving. I'm just changing altitude." The next morning, she stood on the same stage where she'd first addressed the company years ago after the scandal. The same hangar, the same smell of fuel and hope. The employees gathered new faces, familiar ones, all watching with reverence. Celeste began quietly. "When I stood here years ago, I made a promise that no one would ever be told again that they didn't belong in this sky. I think we've kept that promise." Her gaze moved across the crowd. "The work will go on because the sky doesn't end where one journey does. It stretches beyond us, waiting for the next hands, the next hearts." Naomi stood near the front, eyes shining. Harold clapped first. Then the entire hangar erupted in applause that seemed to vibrate the walls. Celeste closed her eyes for a moment, absorbing it not as noise, but as warmth. When the applause faded, she said simply, "Thank you for flying with me." That afternoon, she walked alone along the runway outside, heels clicking against the concrete. A plane roared overhead, lifting toward a horizon painted in gold. For a brief second, she lifted her face to the wind, smiling. "You were worth it," she whispered, "to the journey, to the pain, to the sky itself." Then she turned and walked back toward the building, not away from her legacy, but toward its next chapter. The morning after her farewell announcement, the world seemed to exhale with her. Dr. Celeste Morgan awoke before sunrise, the city of Houston still cloaked in gentle quiet. For the first time in years, she had no meetings, no headlines waiting, no speeches to prepare, just the sound of birds outside her window and the faint hum of the city waking beneath her. She wrapped herself in a light shawl and walked to the balcony, a steaming cup of tea in hand. The sky was painted with the soft blush of dawn, rose and amber, the colors of renewal. So, this is what peace looks like, she murmured to herself. The air felt almost tender, as if the world itself was holding her breath for a moment longer. Naomi appeared moments later, still in her robe, hair tousled. "You're up early." Again. Celeste smiled. "Habit. The sky wakes before we do." Naomi leaned against the railing, gazing at the horizon. "Feels strange, doesn't it? No schedule, no chaos, no camera crews." "Strange," Celeste said, "but not empty. I think I've spent my whole life trying to prove I deserved a place in the sky. Maybe now I just get to enjoy it." Naomi turned toward her, eyes soft. "You built something extraordinary. Mom, you gave people hope." Celeste nodded gently. Hope was always the point. Not control, not perfection, just hope. Later that morning, Harold called. His voice, as always, was both cheerful and grounded. "Well, I suppose I should say congratulations, officially retired. Dr. Morgan, I prefer the word graduated," she said with a laugh. "Graduated from chaos, you mean?" he teased. Celeste chuckled. "How's the board holding up without me?" "Calm for now. Linda and Javier have things running smoother than ever. Naomi's already in meetings with the new training directors. You taught them well." Celeste, not taught. She corrected softly, reminded. They always knew how to lead. They just needed permission to do it differently. Before hanging up, Harold hesitated. "You really did change the sky, you know." She smiled, her tone warm. "No, Harold, the sky changed me first." By afternoon, Celeste decided to take a walk through the city. No security detail, no press entourage, just herself, in a simple cream coat and sneakers. She stopped by the park near the old flight academy where she'd trained as a young woman. A group of students were gathered near a model plane, laughing as they struggled to assemble it. A girl with dark curls turned and froze. "Wait, are you Dr. Morgan?" Celeste smiled. "I was this morning. Yes. Who are you?" The girl grinned nervously. "I'm Jasmine. We're doing a project for our aviation club. You're kind of the reason most of us joined. Is that so?" "Yeah," Jasmine said. "My mom showed me your first interview, the one where you said, 'Dignity isn't a privilege.' I wrote that on my notebook." Celeste's throat tightened. That's a good place to keep it. The students gathered closer, asking questions, showing her their small aircraft. She listened, laughed, shared small pieces of advice. When one of them asked for a photo, she agreed, standing proudly among them, her hand resting on the tiny model plane. As she walked home, she thought about that first humiliating day on the plane, how small and powerless she'd felt. And now, here she was, surrounded by a generation who would never question if they belonged in the sky. That, she thought, was victory enough. That evening, Naomi found her mother sitting at the piano in the living room, softly playing an old tune Marcus used to love. "I didn't know you remembered that song," Naomi said. Celeste smiled faintly. "It's hard to forget something that once kept you whole." Naomi sat beside her on the bench. "You miss him today, don't you, every day?" Celeste admitted. "But I think he'd be proud. He always said justice wasn't about punishment. It was about repair. Maybe that's what this all was, repair." Naomi placed a hand over hers. "You didn't just repair the system. Mom, You repaired people's faith in it. For a while, they sat in silence, the soft piano notes filling the room like the hum of distant engines. Days turned into weeks. Celeste settled into a rhythm that felt almost sacred morning walks, reading, mentoring young leaders through quiet calls and handwritten letters. The world still mentioned her name occasionally, but she didn't chase it. Legacy, she realized, was not a flame to keep burning, but a torch to pass on. Then, one afternoon, she received an email that made her heart swell. It was from Kayla Grant, the young pilot who'd once told her she wanted to fly on Hope. Attached was a short video from the cockpit of a commercial flight. Kayla's voice came through clearly. "Captain Grant, checking in. Today's route, Dallas to New York. We're cruising at 35,000 feet, and I thought you might like to know, Dr. Morgan, the sky's still beautiful from up here." Celeste laughed softly, tears welling in her eyes. She forwarded the message to Naomi with a note that simply said, "The next chapter has taken off." That night, Naomi invited her to dinner at the Morgan Institute campus. When Celeste arrived, she was surprised to find the auditorium filled with people, employees, students, journalists, even passengers she had once helped. A banner stretched across the stage, a legacy of flight, honoring Dr. Celeste Morgan. Naomi took the microphone, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Tonight, we celebrate not a career, but a calling. My mother taught us that progress is not measured in profits, but in people. And though she's stepping back, her story will keep guiding every takeoff and every landing from here on out." The crowd stood as Celeste approached the stage, visibly moved. She took the microphone, scanning the sea of faces. "I've been called many things over the years. A leader, a survivor, a reformer. But the truth is, I'm just someone who refused to stop believing that the sky could change." Her voice softened. "When I was denied that seat all those years ago, I thought I'd lost something. But now I know I was being redirected, because sometimes, when the world closes one door, it's not rejection, it's rerouting." Laughter and applause filled the room. She smiled, her eyes glistening. "So, my message to all of you is simple. When life drags you down, remember it's only turbulence. Keep flying." The standing ovation that followed seemed endless. But what struck her most were the faces young and old, diverse and bright, all living proof that her story had done what she hoped it would: open the sky for everyone. Later, as the crowd dispersed and the lights dimmed, Celeste stepped outside. The night was cool and still. Above her, a single plane crossed the moonlit sky. She tilted her head, following its ascent until it vanished into darkness. "Safe travels," she whispered. And for the first time, she didn't feel the need to chase it. She had already arrived. The wind stirred softly, carrying the faint scent of jet fuel and jasmine, the smell of both flight and home. And as the city lights flickered beneath the vast, forgiving sky, Dr. Celeste Morgan smiled and whispered the words that had guided her all her life. "The sky remembers." The story of Dr. Celeste Morgan reminds us that dignity is not something the world gives, it's something we carry within ourselves. No matter how old we are, no matter how often life tries to push us aside, there is power in choosing grace over anger and purpose over pride. Celeste's journey teaches us that the greatest victories are not loud, they're quiet, patient, and deeply human. For older viewers, her story is a reflection of time and endurance. It tells us that age does not mean the end of impact, and wisdom is not weakness, it's strength refined by experience. Life will hand us moments of injustice, but how we respond to them defines who we are. Celeste didn't win because she fought harder. She won because she refused to let bitterness define her legacy. Her triumph wasn't just about owning an airline, it was about reclaiming the right to belong anywhere. So, when life seats you in the wrong row, remember, it's never too late to stand up with grace and say, "This is my sky," too. Thank you so much for watching and sharing this journey with us. If Celeste's story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories that remind us what strength, justice, and compassion truly mean. Your support helps keep these voices alive.